Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the March 14th, 2023 meeting of the Conservation Commission. This is a public meeting. It's being broadcast and recorded. We have two formal rules. One is that we introduce ourselves, and the second is that we invite everyone to speak, but to do so, we do ask that you identify yourself. And then we do invite your questions and comments. My name is John Kiernan. I'll just do this by looking what I see on the screen. Steve, can you introduce yourself?
Steve Ibis, Conservation Agent.
Tom Palmer.
Tom Palmer, member at CONCOM.
Wendy Garpo. Wendy, you're on mute.
You're muted.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Wendy Garpo, one of the commissioners.
Thanks, Wendy. And Hans, good evening.
Hi, Hans Van Lingen, Conservation Commissioner.
All right, we have our quorum. We're ready to go. Before we begin with the agenda, I want to point out to the public that we are going to continue some of the items, and rather than wait until we get there, I want to alert the public initially. If you look at 8, 9, and 10, 8 is a request for determination of applicability at Brush Hill Lane and 0 Milton Avenue. They have formally written and requested a continuance, which we grant. 9 and 10 are both at 1259 Brush Hill Road. One is for Lot C, one is for Lot D. I believe they are asking for a continuance, but I haven't received it in writing. If anybody is here, I invite you to speak, but I think those are going to be continued. Steve, is that your understanding as well?
That is my understanding as well. Yes, John.
All right. Well, when we get there, we'll call it out again, but for the public's benefit, I believe those 8 and 9 will also be continued at the request of the applicant. So we go back to the beginning. We've got a full agenda tonight, so we ask everyone to speak. We encourage it, but we ask you to be concise. Number 1 on the agenda is notice of intent, 80 Edge Hill Road. And I see Marina and I see Jen. Good evening.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Marina Fernandez. I'm the town engineer here in the town of Milton. As you know, this is Jen Johnson. She is a senior engineer with Niche Engineering. She's been working with us on the design of this proposed project.
And for the public's benefit, we did have a site walk a couple of weeks ago. Jen was with us and walked us through it. Members of the public were present. The Conservation Commission was present. And at the time, we asked for a little bit of additional information having to do with the ponding and how deep it would be and how long it would last. And Jen, I saw your letter. Can you explain what additional data you have given to us?
Sure. So what I did based on your question, which was specifically to figure out how much the pond will, how deep the pond will be in certain storm events, including that water quality storm that we had talked about, as well as some of the larger design storms. And then also there was a question about how often that overflow structure would be used. So what I did is I went back to the stormwater report. So this is information that was consistent with what was previously submitted. It was just a clarifying table to help support the answers to your questions. We found that in the half-inch storm event, which is our water quality storm and the storm that we're trying to treat, the ponding depth is about 4.5 inches, 4.4 inches to be exact. And it takes about 14 hours after we get to that depth for the pond to fully draw down. And then for the larger storm events, the 2 10 and 100 year storms, we have ponding up to 9.4 inches in that largest storm. And that takes about 16 hours to draw down. And in those larger storm events, we are using the bypass structure or the overflow structure. So you'll see a little water trickling out of that. But the pond depth is only designed to be about 9 inches deep in that bigger storm.
Thank you very much. Now that's a pretty rapid drawdown for a 100-year storm, the 16 hours. Can you explain why? This is for the public's benefit. We've talked about
Absolutely.
it.
So because the basin is only designed to pond 9 inches, which is not too deep, it's less than a foot, and we have such a large footprint for the basin, the soils are able to absorb that water quite quickly. And that's why the drawdown is so quick, about 16 hours.
That's great. I thank you very much. You've answered certainly my questions. Other questions from commission members? And again, for the public's benefit, the whole purpose of this design and its best management practices to essentially clean the water that's draining into Unquity Brook, which in turn drains into the Neponset River. And the whole concept here is to get the contaminants out of the water and improve the quality of the Neponset River. Are there questions from members of the public, whether they're abutters or not? I see none. Is there a motion to issue the order of conditions as discussed and with the conditions that we did discuss, including this new data? A motion, this is a notice of intent.
I so move.
Thanks, Tom. Is there a second?
I second, John.
Thank you, Wendy. Any discussion?
I'd
Hearing
just
none.
like to say that
Yes, Tom.
I'm really pleased this project is happening because it will help the brook stay clean.
Yep, that's great. It is. I think it's well designed and well intentioned, and hopefully will be entirely successful. So we'll call for a roll call vote. Tom, how do you vote?
Yay.
Wendy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Hans, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote John Kiernan, yay as well. That's a unanimous vote. And the time is 7:35, Steve. Thank you very much, Marina. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate your good hard work and look forward to the completed project.
Thanks so much.
All right, good night.
Have a good evening.
Right.
Thank you.
I'm going to stay for the next topic as well.
Perfect. All right. Number 2 on the agenda is notice of intent at 374 Central Avenue. That's where Central Avenue goes over the top of Pine Tree Brook. Marina, are you presenting that or is somebody else?
We are presenting it.
Good. All right, Tracy.
I'll introduce myself first, and then I'll let my colleague introduce herself as well. Can you guys all see me? I can't.
Yes,
Okay.
you can see
Just
you.
wanted to double check. Thanks. My name is Tracy Sedhalter. I am a senior project manager and wetland and wildlife biologist at TRC, working with Boston Gas Company or National Grid in this instance on this project at 374 Central Street. And I'll let my coworker Olivia Shaw introduce herself as well.
Yeah, so I'm Olivia Shaw. I am also an environmental scientist with TRC, sort of been assisting Tracy with this project, representing Boston Gas Company here tonight. And I will start sort of just with a bit of background on the project. So the reason for the project is to replace a section of natural gas distribution line pipeline. The reason for this is it's been exposed to air and water where Central Avenue crosses over Pine Tree Brook. So there's been a lot of advanced corrosion and sort of accelerated deterioration of the system. So Boston Gas Company has decided to replace this section just sort of in advance of any contingencies that might happen. And as you mentioned, it's located about closest to 327 Central Avenue. And it's going to be entirely within the existing roadway of Central Ave where it crosses over Pine Tree Brook. And I believe the roadway at that area is about 50 feet wide. And they're going to be relaying a 60-foot length of pipeline. So they're going to be removing the old 8-inch cast iron pipeline and replacing it with a 12-inch coated steel pipeline.
Olivia, can I stop you there? And this is just my own ignorance here, but I noticed in your report that you used the word relay. In your technical language, is that the same thing as replace?
It is to my knowledge, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep,
I saw relay and I said, wait a minute. Later on it said replace. But we're talking about the same thing.
Yep. Relay
Perfect.
means to just replace in kind.
Perfect.
Yeah, in the same area. Yep.
Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt, Olivia.
Yeah, no problem. Go ahead with questions anytime. So there are a few resource areas in the general vicinity of the project. So there's bordering land subject to flooding, there's riverfront area, there's wetland buffer zone, there's a little bit of wetland, and then there's land under water bodies and bank. And we are, just as a side note, we're filing this as a limited project under the exemption for maintenance of underground public utilities. So I'll give a little bit more background on the project site and sort of the surrounding area. So there are a lot of residential properties in the area. There's Turner's Pond Park located to the northeast, and then Chase S. Pierce Middle School to the southwest. And there are 2 other schools located within the vicinity of the site. I believe they're within hang on, within 1,500 feet. And as a result of the proximity to these schools, I think we've been in contact, I believe the company has been in contact with the town. We're going to try to time construction to be during the off season of school, so when people are out of session, between June and August, just to avoid any traffic or noise impacts that might happen to the nearby schools. And then the nature of the pond in that, the stream in that area is it is a controlled stream. The banks are concrete vertical embankments, and then the bottom is a poured concrete bottom. So it's an already sort of like impacted controlled stream. And the culverted crossing is a brick culverted arch crossing. And that's where the pipeline has been exposed. So I'll talk a little bit about the resource areas specific to the site as well. So there is some wetland mapped by Mass DEP in the vicinity of the project area. But since we'll be working entirely within the roadway and then a little bit within the stream, there won't be any temporary or permanent impacts to the wetland. There's also land under water bodies and waterways, obviously within the stream. There will be some temporary impacts to that. We'll be using sandbag cofferdams. So we'll be placing one dam upstream and one dam downstream of the replacement. And then we'll use a pump and a pipe to divert the flow of the stream. And that's just to avoid any sedimentation or dust that might fall in the stream and then be carried downstream during construction. So the temporary impacts to land underwater will be associated with those, and then we'll restore everything to its original condition when we're done, and there will be no permanent impacts. And then there will be another set of impacts to the sort of like the buffer zones, which are riverfront area, bordering land subject to flooding, and then a 100-foot buffer zone. And those will be associated with the excavation and the trenching within the roadway, the relaying or replacement of the pipeline, and potentially some temporary stockpiling of materials, which will also be located within the roadway. But as with the stream, everything will be restored to its original condition at the end. The road will be repaved, and there will be no permanent impacts to any of these resource areas. And we also looked at the bank of the streams, and because the nature of the banks is a really solid concrete, the placement of the sandbag cofferdams won't have any impacts, temporary or permanent, on the banks. And we won't be doing any work directly in the banks. And then just to be extra careful, we did another search of Mass GIS databases, and we double checked there are no outstanding resource waters, areas of critical environmental concern, or any natural heritage priority or estimated habitats in the area of the project.
Olivia, thank you. About 10 years ago, we permitted a project. I can't remember if the applicant was DCR or I think it was, but they were cleaning up the Pine Tree Brook, a little bit downstream of where you were, and they had some equipment, but it was very specialized equipment with very large rubber wheels. If they were in the brook, do you intend to put any equipment in the brook?
Not aside from the sandbag cofferdams.
Yeah,
no.
That's it.
Okay.
The only other thing that was sort of in the brook, they are looking at placing a net directly under the culverted arch. That will be sitting above the brook, and they'll be using that to catch debris and any items like that may fall, but that won't be placed in the brook using any kind of equipment. All the placement of material in the, the sandbags, both upstream and downstream, will be placed without using electronic machinery.
All right. Apropos of that very point, we did a project. There's a pedestrian bridge down near the Baker Chocolate factory. And again, I can't recall who the applicant was, but it was state driven. And they were cutting some steel there. And the concern that we had was lead paint. Is there any lead paint on your pipes? And I assume you have to cut the pipes to pull them out.
That's a wonderful question. I actually do not have the answer to that. I would have to ask the engineers. To my knowledge, there is not, but I would not, feel comfortable telling you with 100% certainty that there's not. That's something we can ask the engineers and get back to you, and kind of get that information back to you. But I just wouldn't want to give you information that may or may not be correct.
While you're looking into that, can you also check, is there any chance of it being asbestos wrapped or anything like that?
I will also ask that as well.
In terms of access to install the in-stream protection, how are you proposing to get down there? I don't.
Yeah.
It's a very.
Yeah, sure. We can talk about that. So essentially the plan is to walk the sandbags down. They will also be using a pump to remove water. So essentially they'll put the upstream cofferdams in place first and start pumping water, and then they'll put the downstream one in as well. Or might have been the other way around. Either way, they'll be hand placing them.
And so
my understanding.
Walked in from where? Is there access along the side of the bridge, or is there a separate point where you have to?
I believe they're walking in from the side of the bridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, can we, there may be more questions, but my comment is that I'd like to be able to condition this. It sounds like a great project. But I'd like to be able to condition it in some fashion that we have some assurance of hazmat control, so that if there is, as Hans asked about, asbestos wrap, or if there is lead paint, we'd want some kind of a protocol for ensuring that doesn't end up in the stream.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah, that
or
makes
the
sense.
air, for that matter.
Yeah, right. Like, or in people's lungs or things like that while they're doing work. Yeah, let me reach out to the grid engineering team with that question, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
All right. Are there other questions from commission members?
We also have another item later on, also a gas project, informational gas main replacement. And the letter about that is from National Grid. But
That's also my project, just so you know. It's also my project.
What did you say? Excuse me? I didn't hear you.
That's also my project. So I'd be happy to answer questions about that. That specific project is actually, it's just informational sent to you. The project itself is technically, we don't have to have it permitted because it's under one of the like waivers from the state and from the Milton bylaws. But obviously I'm happy to stay on and answer questions about that too.
Maybe you could tell me this distinction between National Grid and Boston Gas. Are they the same company?
Boston Gas is a entity of National Grid.
Okay.
So this project is also Boston Gas. Both of these are Boston Gas Company. They're just entities that the gas maintenance, the gas side of the company is Boston Gas Company. National Grid is the overarching company, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Of course, happy to clarify.
One question about during construction. I know it's not exactly within the purview of the Wetlands Protection Act, but in terms of traffic access through that area, is it going to require detours, lane closures, that sort of thing?
That would need to be something that's coordinated with police from the town. My understanding is there'll be, that section of the roadway will be closed off, obviously, during construction. My guess is the town will request that there are police, on duty routing. That's typically something that that's a little outside of our purview here, but usually in my experience is that's sort of up to the town how they request to have it done, and then National Grid will work and Boston Gas Company will work in coordination with them to kind of make that determination once the projects, reach permitting approvals and things like that.
Hans, to answer that question, we have requested from National Grid traffic management plan to be submitted to the engineering department for us to review. We work directly with the police department and approve that and make comments. So that's in the works.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. I was like, I'm sure they're working on it, but that's not really under my knowledge. So thank you.
As I said, I did recognize it was outside of the Wetlands Protection Act. So.
All right, other commission members have a question? And you may want to, I don't know if there are any abutters, but I'm sure that they, if they're not here, they would be concerned with, the length of time that the project is going to take and what sequence of construction is. I mean, are they going to be opening trenches, leaving them open? How long do you think the open trench will be there? They may have concerns about, safety.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to answer that question. So the trenching, obviously, long term is open over the project itself to take approximately 2 months to complete. But typically, how this work is done is they open sections at one end of the project and then another end of the project, and then sort of do it section by section, and then use items to close off the roadway overnight when they're not completing construction. And then those get open again at the beginning of the next day and kind of roll with it that way. It's typical. It's sort of similar how you would see any kind of water main replacement done. Sort of same idea within roadways. That's typically how it's completed. So I hope that helps. If somebody wants to ask for a little more clarity, obviously I can provide it.
All right. Are there any members of the abutters or members of the public that have a question or would like to make a comment? I can't see the screen, so I have no idea. Steve, can you see the screen, see if any hands are up?
I don't see any, but somebody should say something. There are.
That's true.
Okay.
I do have one last question. Do you anticipate any service disruption as a result of the work?
No.
Okay.
So obviously, this is sort of pre-planning associated with working on these lines. So that's why we do, preemptively do this type of work to prevent any disruption to service. The Boston Gas Company will obviously shut off this section of pipe during construction for obvious reasons, and then they will reroute around the rest of the system to provide and maintain service for their customers in the area, so that there isn't disruption. That's part of why we do these projects, make sure that we're staying on top of them and doing maintenance so that we don't have disruptions to service. So like there might have been if there had been an emergency, and so then it prevents that from happening.
Perfect. Appreciate the answer.
All right. My thought is, and Steve, you might be able to help out with this, or actually anybody can help out with it, but I'd like to have some kind of a, number one, a pre-construction meeting. And I think Marina has already indicated that that's going to happen for us, coordinating with traffic and police, et cetera. But in addition, I'd like to have Steve Ivas participate in the pre-construction meeting to make sure that we have in hand some kind of a hazmat control plan, so that if there is lead paint or asbestos encountered, we have a mechanism already in place to respond to that. So I think that should be part of the order of conditions. In addition, right now you said there's no equipment, but rather than us putting a condition on it and saying that thou shalt not have any equipment in the brook, it might make sense to say that if there are field changes that require it, that you contact the Conservation Commission so that we can approve the type of equipment that goes into the brook, as we did in that permit that I mentioned, I don't know, whatever, it's 10 years ago. It was special equipment, so they didn't just put a bobcat, into the middle of the stream.
Perfect. No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that would work great.
All right, Steve, do you have any ideas as to how to, phrase that condition that to the extent that any hazardous materials are encountered, that the applicant would be required to submit a hazmat control plan specifically designed to keep it out of the air and keep it out of the brook, whether it's asbestos or lead that's, friable or airable, I guess.
I think you just said it, John.
All right.
Perfect.
All right.
Yeah, and I was going to say I've already sent an email out to the client as we were speaking. So hopefully, I'll reach out to Steve as soon as I get any more information and can pass that along as well. Before anything, should have you an answer fairly quickly. So.
All right. So for conditions of an order of conditions, I suggest that we have a hazmat control plan, that there be a pre-construction meeting. And obviously you're going to have that with the town engineer, but we'd like to participate. That is a Concom would like to be represented at that pre-construction meeting as well. In addition, I'd like to make sure that if any equipment is going to be become necessary, that before it enters the brook itself, there'd be notice given to us to approve the kind of equipment entering the stream itself. Because as you know, our big concern is you put hydraulic equipment in there, you know you're going to pop a hose, and we're going to have some kind of petroleum product in the stream.
Yeah, that's always how it works, right?
Yes, right. It's the way they're made. So that would be a condition as well, that we receive notice and approve the kind of equipment that's going into the stream if it becomes necessary. Any other? Wendy, I'm looking at you. I know you're on mute. Did you have any thoughts or comments? I can't hear you. The wonders of being muted.
There we go. My apologies. Nothing that hasn't been addressed. Thank you, John.
All right, Tom, anything else?
I'm good.
All right, Hans?
No, I'm good.
All right, so is there such a motion with the conditions that we've discussed?
I'll make that motion.
All right, thanks, Hans. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion? We'll take a roll call vote then. Tom Palmer, how do you vote?
Yay.
Wendy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Hans, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yay as well, John Kiernan. That's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much, Tracy and Olivia.
Thank you so much for having us. We've appreciated the opportunity to speak with you. And Steve, I will look forward to meeting you in person for a site walk. So looking forward to it.
All right, great. Thank you all.
Quick question.
Yes.
Would you like me to stay on for the other Boston Gas Company project at the very end? Would you like me to stand by in case you have questions, or are you good? I'm happy.
Yes,
to stay
right.
on.
I mean, if it is an informational item.
Yeah.
And it might make sense. We usually don't adjust the agenda, because if the public is watching the agenda, then somebody might join later on.
Yeah. No,
But
totally fine. I can hop back off and put my daughter to bed and jump back on at the end of the meeting if that's helpful.
Oh, that's great. That'd be perfect.
Okay.
I just don't want to, trick the public.
Totally fine. I'll be back at the end of the meeting and I'll speak with you all again then.
Oh, Tracy, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. Next on the agenda is number 3, notice of intent, 107, 111 Highland Street and lot K-2-2. Good evening, Ned. Are you presenting tonight?
I am presenting a quick overview and handing off to team members. I am Ned Corcoran, for the record, representing Northbridge Companies LLC, which has property at 107, 111, and what I guess I'd call 0 Highland Street, under agreement with the Milton Hospital, and is pursuing development of a memory care facility. Quick overview: this property was historically a farm that was subdivided in the 80s to 4 lots. One of the lots was sold, developed, and is now occupied by Karen Bacardi and her family. 3 other lots had not that one, that one. 107 is at the upper corner. It was a single family dwelling. That dwelling was raised a couple of years ago. 111 Highland is sort of in the middle. There's an old unoccupied dwelling there. And then 0 Highland was never developed. It was really sort of a wooded, was a field, and then it became woods. In 2015, the planning board conducted a master plan process, and this site was called out for development of assisted living, specifically by the master plan. Pursuant to that, the hospital went into a procurement process over the last few years and selected Northbridge to pursue a memory care, which is a lower impact form of assisted living than standard assisted living, largely because occupants don't drive. And so the traffic is somewhat minimized. A year ago tonight, town meeting passed zoning authorizing this property to be developed for that purpose, subject to a special permit before the planning board. And a hearing will start on that application on Thursday evening with the planning board this coming Thursday, March 16th. Tonight, we're before you for the third time, really, with the notice of intent associated with the development of this memory care facility. We were previously before you with an ANRAD, board approved, commission approved an ORAD several years ago, and has approved two separate negative determinations of applicability, one to conduct test pits, and the second more recently to conduct soil borings. When those borings were conducted in December, Steve Ivis was present during both of those situations. I'm joined tonight by Mike Walrazak, who is a senior employee with Northbridge. He is their project manager. Blaine Buck, who is a project manager on the private side. Paul Avery, who was the project engineer and who filed the notice of intent in this case, and Art Allen, who was an environmental scientist with Ecotech, who did the original wetlands delineation report and has worked with us on invasive species management more recently. And with that, unless you have questions about the overview, I would hand it to Paul Avery to get into the specifics of the notice of intent filing.
Ned, I do have a question.
Sure.
And this is going to sound like it's monetary and procedural, but it's not. On the face of your cover letter, when you list the fees paid, it says Town of Milton fee. It's based upon 4.5 acres. And later on in the project description, it's referred to as 10.5 acres. And again, it's not a money thing, but are we talking about you're talking one about lot or combined lots?
I'm talking about all three combined lots. That's an oversight I wasn't aware of. The total acreage is 10.5. And so if there's an adjustment to the fee, we'll make that ASAP.
All right, thanks. And again, it wasn't driven by money, but it was driven by, which lot are you talking about, or are some lots being excluded? Because my understanding
we're talking about three lots being recombined as one, and the fee should reflect that. And
so is it the lot area or the area of the project?
It's the lot area.
Okay. All right, so that was just based on the disturbance, the area of work.
Understood.
Okay, we can clarify.
We'll clean that up. Thank you.
Okay, can I share screen?
Yes,
go right ahead.
Steve will assist you.
I will stop sharing my screen. Hopefully, here we go. Go right ahead, Paul.
All right, thank you. Okay, can you see my screen with a rendered site plan?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm Paul Avery with Oak Consulting Group. Ned just did all the intros. This is an overview of the project here. We can get into that in a little more detail as we move through the slides here. I thought we would start with just a quick refresher here. This is a color enhanced site plan of existing conditions that shows the outcome of the order of resource area determination process that we went through 1 to 2 years ago, where we identified numerous resource areas. Just starting from the inside out, we have the green area that runs through here. Those are the areas of BVW. Within these, there are a few things on the east side of the strike. We have an intermittent stream, which ends with a culvert running underneath the existing driveway to the 111 Highland Street house. On the other side, there's another intermittent stream that comes down on the west side of the site. These two streams converge into the streams themselves dissipate, but they terminate in a greater wetland area at the north end of the site, which is this green area here. Within that, we have the darker blue circle, which is a vernal pool. Moving outward from all of that, the pink areas are the Town of Milton non-disturbance zones. And there are two of them which are combined here. There's the 25 feet off of the BVW, which runs around, and then it expands out a little bit further in a couple of areas where we have the 100-foot non-disturbance zone extending off of the vernal pool. There are also a couple of other blue areas here. As part of the ANRAD process, we identified bordering lands subject to flooding. There are no mapped flood zones on this site, but we went through the exercise and determined what the extents of flooding would be for the 100-year storm event and came up with limits of bordering lands subject to flooding, and that was part of the ORAD process. For the most part, the flood zones there are inside the non-disturbance zone, but there are a couple of areas, there are three of them actually, one here, and then another one just down in the corner where it actually does extend out beyond the non-disturbance zones. And then finally, the yellow areas here, that's just the 100-foot buffer zone to the BVW under the State Wetlands Protection Act. The project itself, here's an overview of the overall site, and we'll zoom in on this a little bit more closely here. But the project is confined to the northern portion of the site. This panhandle down here is not part of the project, not being developed. It's comprised of 3 lots, as Ned discussed earlier, and we really focus on developing within the upland areas of this site. This is a more detailed layout here, and if we want to come back to this, we can. We have retaining walls here to minimize the amount of impacts to the wetlands. So there's retaining walls around the site. We've got the non-disturbance zones here, which are a little clearer in the next slide. We have parking in the rear to support the parking demands of the project, and we have parking in the front as well. We have a service area coming down here in front of the building. Well, it's to the side of the building, but on the east side of the building towards Highland Street. This graphic here is the same plan, but what this does is this puts behind it the resource areas that I just walked through a minute ago. And I think this is helpful because it shows the minimization efforts that, you know, we need to get it at parking in the rear of the site through this upland area here. The building itself is all in the upland areas. Where we have crossed through from Highland Street is generally along the area of the existing drive. We need to make it a little bit wider to get fire trucks and other vehicles in here, and we have a sidewalk. So it is wider, but it generally follows the same path. And then where we made the crossing again to get to the rear parking, as you can see, is just a straight shot through the resource areas and the non-disturbance zones. This, where we transition from the pink to yellow, that's the limits of the non-disturbance zone, and then the remaining 75 feet of buffer zone. And all the rest of the project elements, the sidewalks, the parking, the terraces, the buildings, the service areas, all of that is outside of the non-disturbance zones. Okay, so if we start to look at the activities subject to regulation, we are doing some filling of wetlands that we need to do to make the crossing here and to make the crossing here. I'm going to go into another sheet in a second, but this area on the entrance drive, we're calling fill area 1, fill and replication area 1, and then over here is fill and replication area 2. And on the next sheet, we can see a blow up of these, that the red hatching in here, here's this line with the dots on it is the edge of BVW, so that these areas where we have to, you know, go up to the retaining wall are areas that will be filled in order to accommodate the wider roadway. This blue area here, this is the area of replication. So we have 350 square feet here that we're filling and another 2,700 that we're creating in replication. It doesn't show on this particular plan, but this replication area is generally where that existing shed is. That's, you know, sort of a carriage house and elongated open-sided shed structure. The other area, this is at the crossing to the back parking lot. This one, these two balance out more. So the wetland fill area here is 1,350 square feet, and the replication is just a little bit more than 1,400. This one, trying to do more replication immediately adjacent to it was more difficult because the wetlands areas are limited to areas just beyond that aren't already wetlands, and so that the opportunity there was a little tighter. So this is skewed a little bit towards wetlands replication area 1. I have a summary here that basically shows that here's the fill area, 350 fill, 2,700 replication for 1, and then 1,350 and 400, with net gains of 2,400 total, and the replication ratio ends up being 2.41 to 1. Okay. Art Allen is on the phone. He is the author of the protocol here that talks about all the plantings we're going to do, the methods and procedures. Do we want to go into that now, or do we want to keep going?
I have a question about that.
Okay.
Tom Palmer speaking. I noted page 8 of the narrative, invasive species management. The applicant understands that there are various invasive species, including Japanese knotweed, present at the site, both within and beyond the proposed limits of work, and that these species are of concern to the town of Milton. I didn't see a plan that showed where invasives were, but I know that there's knotweed all up and down the street edge and elsewhere on the property. And I would suggest that the site be mapped for invasives so that this plan can be more specific about what exactly is going to be done. If they were to be removed, as it describes on one of the plans, there's a routine described for removing the knotweed. I think that has to be accompanied by planting, because the removal will leave a lot of space for things to grow. And if you don't plant, you will get another invasive, maybe. So I just like to argue for a little more completeness about that aspect of the project.
Okay. Would you like us to, and again, this is 11-acre site, much of which is undisturbed. Are we mapping all of the knotweed on the entire site, or just within the project area where we expect to do work and disturb it?
I think you have to do the entire site, because most of it is outside where you're working. Most of it is along the road. And I don't think you'll find it in the wooded areas. So it's mostly along the road. But that area itself is non-disturbed zone. So it would be useful to have detail about what's going to be done and what will be planted. And yeah, I would ask that you look at the whole site rather than just the work area, which doesn't include the road edge.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, no, understood. So
can I hold you for a minute,
sure.
Paul?
Yep.
And go to Steve. I can't read. I've got the application in my hand, but it would be impossible for the public to read the protocol for replanting. Steve, have you had an opportunity, or Wendy, or somebody that's more conversant with, the different types of plantings and native versus non-native species? Have you had a chance to look at that, Steve, to see whether or not they comply with our requirement for native?
I have not, John, sorry.
Okay.
So John, before we get into that, I would like to dig in a little bit more into the proposed wetland crossings.
Sure.
Is that?
Yes, Ed, go ahead.
Sure. You're jumping ahead a little bit, but I'd be happy to talk about it. So go ahead.
Well, okay. No.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, why don't you get there when you get there? I don't want to.
All right. So I basically, one of the topics here and that it's coming up is just stream crossings. Okay. So, how we're doing it. So if you want me to do that, or we can, if you have a specific question, we can take it now.
No.
All right.
You want to know your handle?
I'll keep going, and then when we get, you can stop and interrupt at that point if you want to get into more detail on it.
Yeah.
So as we talked about before, the next item here, there was some. Although most of the the bordering land subject to flooding is outside the non-disturbance zone. When we modeled it, that it actually goes through and encompasses some of the existing driveway. So when we put this new driveway in, we're actually going to be displacing some flood storage. So what we've done here, and it's all summarized in the table down below, but basically we look at what the flood storage is that's displaced on an elevation by elevation basis. So between 113 and 114, these are the areas here that are shown in red. So I've got the red hatching here where we're filling it in. And then this, the fill area, the replication area between 113 and 114 is up in here. We've got the green that's hatched this way and then the green replication. So those are the two different elevation areas. They're called out, but basically what we've done is where we displaced 550 at this 1 foot interval, we created 910 for a net gain of 360. And then at the next elevation, 114, 115, we have these numbers and we have a net gain of 314. So we've replicated and exceeded the flood storage summary, the replication of the flood storage in each case. We've got a similar situation for the second area where we're doing it here in the rear. We've got the areas of the fill. The blue is one of the elevations is, well, it starts with the red, which is 121. So there's the fill and there's the replication. The stripes, these two are the fill and here's the replication. And there's this little small brown area in here that's the same thing. And again, the displaced storage, we create more than we are filling in this to meet the performance
Paul,
standard.
Should that be cubic feet rather than square feet?
No, it's because it's the area and it's on a foot by foot basis.
Right, so it should be a cubic foot.
Well, then you can multiply it by one and it's a cubic foot. So it's
exactly.
Yeah, right. So, but it's, yeah, okay, sure.
You're talking about volume that you're displacing, so it should be cubic feet.
Yeah,
okay. What is the area?
All right.
Sorry.
Okay.
Do you have a cross section of that, of what the grade will look like?
No, we just, so this is just hatched up to show what we're doing here. The grading plan, you can see the contours show how we do it. We didn't, because the areas are sort of scattered all over the place, you know what I mean? And so we've got fill here and then we excavate it over in this area. So I'm not sure what, they don't all line up. So I'm not sure how we do a cross section of it.
So walk me through that again. So the flood storage is spread out over the flood storage mitigation is spread over the three areas there?
Right. So the way it works is you need to do it. So in other words, if I just looked at the total cubic footage and we're displacing so many cubic feet of flood storage, you can't just create that in one place. You need to have the same amount incrementally at each elevation so that it behaves the same way.
I understand how it works.
Okay, so in this case, what we've done is in this particular area here, I have three separate elevations between 121 and 122, 122 and 123, and 123 and 124. And then I just went in here with different colors. So the blue happens to be the 123, 124. So I have two areas here where we're filling that are between the existing 123 and 124 contours. Okay. And then I came out over here and I created another area which is greater than the sum of those two at the same elevation.
Okay.
Okay.
And so the flood storage mitigation area is just the area that doesn't have the hatch. It's that blue. It's
with the dots. So the one with the lines is what's being filled, and then the same color with the dots is what's being created.
Okay. So you could actually create a cross section of that elevation profile right there. Of what the material that you're removing to create that storage volume. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
But no, it's a small area, so I guess it's not a huge deal.
Okay. All right. Any other thing else on the flood storage at the moment?
I think I'm jumping ahead, but it does relate to flood storage. When you're in the stream crossings, I'm at the very top of page 7. When you're talking about mitigation downstream, and it says at the very top of the page 7, replacing this culvert with an unrestricted stream crossing would increase downstream flooding, regardless of the proposed project.
Yep.
These reasons, a larger but similar culvert configuration is proposed. So I'm trying to figure this out, because essentially I think what you're saying is that a larger culvert will decrease the flooding downstream.
No, so this is how the design evolved, okay? That we looked at starting with the crossing at the rear, okay? That we had the intermittent stream here, and we treated this as a stream crossing, okay? So what we did here, and this is the stream crossing, and we're putting in a box culvert here that's 10 feet wide and 4 feet high, and we have an openness ratio of 0.93. Okay, so what this does is, by doing this intermittent stream crossing here, we basically protect the natural characteristics of the stream that will let wildlife go through it and all the other things that we're trying to do. We attempted to do that on the front driveway crossing as well. So this is kind of a design evolution thing. And when we first did it and we ran the numbers, it's like, well, look at this. We can, because of the stormwater detention practices we're putting in, we can actually build that front one like a stream crossing like this with the box culvert, and we still don't have an increase in peak runoff. We had a preliminary meeting with Tetra Tech, who's doing a peer review of all of this for the planning board. And they basically said, well, that's great, but we also want you to look at the upstream sources. So if we just look at the runoff from this site, we could put in a box culvert like this under the driveway as well without increasing the peak runoff because of the other things that we're doing. But when you start to look at all the other water that comes through here, that's not the case anymore. So if we put a box culvert in up front, it would result in an increase in peak runoff for like the 100-year storm event, but it's not until that happens that you had a problem. So what we did was we then just said, well, let's just take it down from a box culvert to a 36-inch pipe. So it looks like, and I should probably just change it back to a 24-inch pipe because I think it will work. But it looks like, why are you putting in a bigger pipe? It's like, well, we put in a bigger pipe just because we are trying to get as close as we could to, the stream crossing objectives. But you can't have a box culvert or you just create flooding impacts, not because of the project, but because of all the water that runs through the east intermittent stream from offsite. So it's sort of an evolution of design. Is it confusing? Does it make sense that we could probably just reduce the size of that pipe down to 24 inches? I haven't run the numbers on it yet, but we probably could, and it would probably still be fine.
But if you're reducing the size of the culvert or you're reducing the size of the pipe, where does the water go?
Well, the existing driveway culvert creates a ponding behind it in the wetlands. Okay, so if I jump ahead here to where is it here? Let me get my right sheet. Where is it? Hang on. There it is. Okay. So here's the plan right now. This is the 36-inch culvert that's currently proposed here. The existing culvert in this area is only 24. Okay. What happens is there is a tremendous amount of water that comes flowing through this intermittent stream from offsite to the south, not from the site itself, but from offsite. And I was going to get to that in a second too. So that this area here, this wetland area, serves as like a detention pond because it's constrained by a 24-inch pipe. Okay. We, at the moment, this plan has increasing that for a 36-inch pipe because that still results in a decrease in peak runoff, even though it's bigger than the one that's there now. Okay. The The smaller one would probably reduce it more, and theoretically you would think so, but you've got to be careful with that because sometimes the timing is such that you're better off to let more water go through sooner than to hold it all back for a big surge at the end. So in all likelihood, if we kept this pipe, this pipe right here as a 24-inch, which it is now, it would probably work fine, but I haven't run the numbers and I'd want to do so before I committed to replacing it or changing it. I think I'm confusing you.
Well, yeah, perhaps. But my question was, where does the water go? If you decrease the size of the pipe rather than increase it, because it sounds like what you said here is that the larger the pipe, the more flooding downstream.
Yeah. So here's
it's either velocity or the water's going somewhere else.
Well, water will be detained in this area here. Okay. Now that's not the only thing that's going on with the design of the project because we've got other measures we're putting in too. Okay. So, right, this figure here represents looking at just the site, the current runoff patterns. Okay. So everything in area 1 comes down here, goes through the western intermittent stream, comes down the vernal pool, and then continues off site. The rest of it is this area 2 that comes down, goes to intermittent stream, goes through this existing 24-inch culvert, comes through here, joins the rest of the water and goes off site. That isn't the full picture because we've also looked at, in addition to areas 1 and 2 right here, we also have all of this area. So basically this OSE, which stands for Offsite East, this entire area here also works its way down and goes through this stream. Okay, so the existing culvert and the proposed culverts both serve as bottlenecks that detain water in this wetland area here. When it goes through, it joins up with the rest of it. There's further detention that happens out in this area just because we have such a large wetland area with a stone outlet in it that's part of the wall that further detention takes place down beyond all of that.
All right, so when the driveway is built, both going to the building and then around the building to the rear parking, is that going to be elevated? I know it's a stream crossing, so do you have retaining walls on one or both sides of the?
Yeah, we do. So basically there's a cross section in the plans that looks like this. This doesn't show the culverts, but this is what the driveway cross section looks like.
Got it. All right.
Okay.
So do you expect ponding on the upstream side? I know there's some currently, I get it.
Yes, there will still be ponding on the upstream side. Now, I think, quite frankly, I think I should go back and look and see whether we could replace that 36-inch to keep it as a 24. I might as well just do it, okay? Because everybody seems to, why is it a 36? Why are you making it bigger? The reason why it's bigger is because we tried to put in a box culvert and I didn't make it any smaller than we needed to try to keep as much of an open channel as we could. But, we should look at what happens if we keep it as a 24. That would be make the detention behind the driveway consistent with what it is today. With a larger pipe, it'll probably be a little bit less than it is now.
If you use the boxed culvert, which would allow the stream pretty much unrestricted access downstream, where would the flooding take place?
Downstream. So the way
right. But I mean, is it closer to, on one of your other maps you showed, like we could get oriented as to like where the vernal pool is, et cetera.
Yeah, okay. So this is turned 90 degrees, okay, from what we had before.
Yes.
Here's Highland Street. Here's the vernal pool.
Yes.
North is left. So all the water leaving this site goes out what's basically a stone weir constructed into the stone wall right here. All of it. So we want to make sure that this project does not increase peak runoff. There's only one point we need to look at it, and it's right here because this is where it all goes. If I just modeled our project site, we could put a box culvert in here and we still wouldn't increase the runoff down there because we're doing other things. We have an infiltration gallery, we have another big basin. I haven't even gotten to those yet. Because we're doing other things, we could put a box culvert in here and not increase peak runoff off site until we consider the rest of the water that comes through, and then it blows up. So if we put a box culvert in there, we would be exacerbating downstream flooding, whether we did the project or not. It's not about the project, it's really about all the water that's coming on the site from the south.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that was the discussion on the box culverts and the stream crossings. Stormwater, we started to look at quickly. I guess I can jump into the other things that we're doing here. The blue, you can see it, I hope, is the proposed drainage structures that we have runoff that comes down the driveway. We're collecting it with two catch basins. There's a water quality unit to treat it for total suspended solids. We have a riprap outfall and then a further vegetated swale before it goes into the wetlands. That's separate. This is the new wetland area we're creating here. The parking lot area out here, what we're constructing is an infiltration gallery, which is a series of 36-inch pipes, perforated pipes. I have a detail for that, which is right here showing how this lays out. So I've got 6 rows of 36-inch pipe laid flat, and the whole thing is 82 feet long. So it's a pretty substantial underground infiltration system that will be constructed beneath the parking lot. And then the other item that we've got is in the rear. We're taking all of the runoff from this rear parking lot here, and we have a swale that comes down, a culvert that goes under the driveway, and then we have a large infiltration basin here. This does not overflow until like a 25-year storm. So this basin here does a lot in terms of really mitigating the peak runoff from the site. The other areas here are just, systems of area drains within the courtyard areas we have around the project. The ones up here we can put into the infiltration system. These ones out here, we don't have the opportunity to it, but all of these get modeled together, and we run the various storm events. We ran 5-year, 10-year, 50, 25, 50, I forget which, and 100-year storm, and show a decrease in peak runoff for all storm of those events from the site itself, and also when we put in all the upstream sources too. Okay, and those numbers are in the report. If we want to look at those, I can dive into that.
Right. If we could backtrack for 1 second on the
Sure.
wetland replication areas, can you talk through how you decided where to site those? And did you look at other alternatives of where those could be sited? The reason I say that is because they are close to, 1, roadways, and 2, discharge areas. I do have some concern of, being degraded over time and the ability for them to be effective as replication areas.
Sure. The approach on wetland replication areas is you generally try to do them as close to the source of where you're filling as possible. So that's what we did. If there are other concerns and there's a preference to put them elsewhere, we can do that. It wasn't like this is the only place we could have put it, but the objective was to try to do this as close to the source of filling as we could.
And so I noticed one of them seems to correspond pretty closely with it looks like a footprint of one of the buildings.
Yep.
Is that, and in terms of, overall site work, that's not the only footprint, right? That's left behind.
Well, that's being removed. Well,
Yes.
all the buildings there, the barn's coming down too.
And so looking at the wetland delineation through that area, I mean, there's, that's kind of what defines the squared off areas. Are there remnants of those buildings that are being left behind that are being untouched? Is that?
I don't think we've gotten into the specifications for demolition, but I think that the entire buildings would come out. That I think it's just on, there's not like a concrete foundation for that shed.
Yeah.
It's an earthen floor, I believe. I think, farm equipment was parked in there and that type of thing.
The intent is to take all those buildings completely out of there.
Yeah.
That would be the intent.
I mean, if there's a preference to put, I mean, your question about, I mean, this gets back to the, here's the 36-inch pipe that, that the larger pipe is going to have the same amount of flow with a lesser velocity. So, that there's in many ways less erosion concerns for normal storm events with a larger pipe than a smaller one. But, if there are concerns and there's a preference for this wetland replication to do it someplace else, we certainly can. This wasn't the only place we could have done it. We just tried to do it as close to the source as possible.
Okay.
But how do you slow the water down coming out of that culvert whether it's 24 or 36 inches?
It's just flat and it dissipates. That's all. I mean, we probably should have some riprap on the end of it. We're not showing it here, but that would be a worthwhile thing to do. Just to, we have it here. We probably should have it here as well. But then we're in the wetlands, and so we didn't. But yeah, I suppose we could put ripraps in there and count that as a wetland fill area too, and add to the replication.
And what are you at for total wetland fill at this point?
The total fill is 1,700 fill and 4,100 replication.
Okay.
Would you rather see it elsewhere?
If possible, if it can be consolidated into a single area, then
yeah,
it makes it.
There's lots of opportunities to do that. So, we could take, because we've got two separate wetlands replication areas. I mean, we could just, combine this one and create a single one that's is bigger than those two and a more protected area. There's enough room to work with here. I'm not really worried about that. We could definitely do it.
If I could, this is Art Allen from Ecotech. If I could just jump in briefly. Sure. I worked on the selection and the design process for these replication areas. And that's actually having the replication as close as possible to the impact is actually one of the performance standards in the regulations. So that was driving the location of these areas. And then, and then that area where the existing carriage shed is, that's obviously degraded area, likely a prior filled wetland, and taking that structure out and putting wetland back in there is a real benefit. And that's kind of what got the numbers up so high, basically just reclaiming that carriage shed area and restoring the wetland in there. So that's a degraded area. It's as close as possible to wetland fill 1. And then the other area, just finding a low area that's suitable in elevation that's as close as possible to fill area number 2 is what drove that other. Other replication.
Yeah, my concern was actually more about area 2, given that you have the swale there and the other, so having it close to that and, over time having just a discharge from a road that close to there, that was bigger concern than the other location. Yeah.
Okay.
Paul, those are all treated discharges, right?
Those are treated discharges, and actually they don't really go towards the wetland. They go more page up than that.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, and what you're saying about area 1 makes perfect sense. I fully agree. I didn't have, like I said, it was more the question relative to area 2 that I was, I brought that up. But if you're confident that any flow coming out of there will be going away from that area, then I'm fine with that.
Okay. Yeah, and we can take a closer look, and we could probably rotate the pipe a little bit to make sure that happens too. Okay. We talked about invasive species. I don't know if there's more questions on that. So the last topic just that I had here is the tree inventory. And this plan is included with the notice of intent that all these darker trees in here, all the ones that we inventory that are 4 inches or greater that are proposed to be cut and within the buffer zone. We've tallied them all up and come up with the number of trees times the diameter, and we get, 2847 inches diameter inches of trees. And from the landscape plan, we end up the sum of the diameters is 463. So we have a differential of 2384, which needs to be resolved. And that is all I have for presentation. We'll kick it over to questions.
I know you're aware of our performance standard, but unless my math is off, that's a chunk of money. If you can't replant them, and obviously some of them will be replanted as part of your landscaping plan. But I've got about approximately, if you round that 2,300 up to 2,400, that's diameter. And if you're planting 4-inch trees, that's 600 trees at $500 a tree.
We know it's a lot of money, John.
All right. I saw it and I did my own math and I said, oh, that's a lot of money.
We've done the math too, and our jaws have dropped accordingly, but we are aware of it, and we understand that that's a performance standard that the commission has, and we'll honor that. We honor that obligation.
All right, I have a question that's found elsewhere. It's not on trees, but it does relate to protecting the environment. In the O&M plan, which is near the back, I guess.
Yep.
I'm looking at the issue of stockpiling snow and de-icing agents. And the issue for us is you've got a lot of wetlands in the area. You've got a vernal pool in the area. And so chemicals to use to de-ice is going to be a significant concern. So I looked at 2.1.3, which doesn't say a whole lot. So to start with, can you tell us where the snow storage areas are?
I can.
What protections you can give us that, we're not going to have chemicals in our vernal pool?
Okay. So the snow storage, because of the fact that we've got these retaining walls here and we're minimizing the impact, there's the long-term snow storage opportunities. There are really just 3 of them that are back here in the rear parking area. Okay. We have designated a short-term snow storage space here. That would just be, there's more parking here than we need for day-to-day operations. So that if we took up a few spaces here temporarily until there was time to move it, we would do that. But the permanent or the long-term snow storage areas are back here in the rear parking area. If you look at these, they are in a place where, where's my 301? It's down here. So that they're not shown on this drawing, but they're against the parking lot here. All of these, as they melt, will run off. They will go down into the swale. They go through a sediment forebay and into the infiltration basin before it gets to the wetland.
Again, we are worried about suspended solids, but we're more particularly interested in the chemicals.
Okay.
So that, the forebays aren't going to help us with the chemicals. How do we prevent the de-icing other than say don't use it? So I'm trying to balance, safety and make sure the public is not slipping and sliding. But by the same token, that we're not using some, magic formula to melt the ice and then have that end up in the wetlands.
Well, have you had other projects where you've requested certain de-icing?
We did. Yeah, and we've restricted the de-icing. We had the issue at 582 Blue Hill Avenue, and I wish Ingrid were here. She couldn't be with us tonight, but she's very conversant with chemicals and how to get rid of them. I know they have some relatively expensive basins to remove chemicals. At least that was the discussion that we had at 582 Blue Hill Avenue. And I'm not sure if that's the mechanism or if it's simply saying, don't use chemicals. Because you're awfully close. And I'm looking where that is. I'm also looking over to the right where the vernal pool is. And you're awfully close. So I think we got to put our, creative collective genius to work here to figure out how to make sure that there are no chemicals that end up in the resource area.
Well, de-icing, obviously, given the demographic here, is a real safety concern. So I have to take a look at, the practices here.
Well, let's think about that, Paul. The demographic is such that the people who will be living there will not be driving, so they're being delivered to and from the front door. Most of the parking is for staff and occasional visitors. So staff would be parking to the rear, visitors would be parking to the front. So safety issue obviously is important. Does the commission have a list of chemicals or preferred chemicals to say that thou shalt not use A, B, and C, but you may use D, E, and F that we could look at?
Steve, you may know this, but I don't think we have such a list, but every time we've confronted the issue, I've turned to Ingrid and said, Ingrid, tell us what chemicals we shouldn't be using or shouldn't be allowing.
I think
that's her specialty.
I think we'd be happy to be restricted to chemicals that the commission is comfortable in allowing to be used.
Is always just using sand and then creating some forebays to collect the sand. That's what many towns are going to these days.
I know there is a trend going in that direction, just as there is to, get rid of the nitrogen fertilizers. And we want to make sure we keep up with the best practices.
John, we can take a look at that and get back more specifically on that.
All right. So on our list here of things to do and additional information, and part of it may be, we've certainly been out to the site, but I would like to see it staked so we have a better idea of where the buildings are going. And I'll tell you why I'm interested in that is if you look to the left of the diagram that's being shared, we see I guess is the property line, but I can't tell what's the distance between the parking lot or the building and the back lot line and the parking lot. And is there a buffer there? Is your landscaping plan putting trees in there? And I can't tell how far away from that is Winter Valley. And do you have plans for some kind of a sheltering buffer?
Yeah. So the landscape plan is, it's cut off there. There's another sheet. I don't have it in my, I don't have it handy here. Let me see if I can get it. I probably have it here. Hold on. Yeah, so we have trees up in here, and then this is a wooded area at the back of it, so that there's trees. It isn't extensive, landscaping here beyond planting trees in that area. With respect to the setbacks, I don't have the drawing that calls that out at the moment here, but they're all called out. On this one? No, it isn't this one. It's
I think I've got it.
Did you have it? C200, I didn't put it, we didn't include it in the notice of intent because it's just zoning items.
Right, but I know we've got building 6 going into Winter Valley, which is in this general area.
Right.
I'm wondering, if there's a sensible mechanism for sheltering both as well. And part of it might be on the other side of the property line, and they have an obligation to create a shelter, and part of it might be on your side of the property line to just plant additional trees there. But I'd like to know how far back that set off is, and that would be something I'd be interested in seeing staked for a site visit.
It's about 60 feet from the edge of the pavement to the Winter Valley. It's 66 feet from the storage building to the edge of the Winter Valley property. So probably 56 feet, 55 feet. What's the length of the parking spot?
50 probably. The parking spaces are 18 feet deep. So, that would be, and the storage building encroaches upon that. So it's 50-ish.
Right.
Which I can tell you what it is.
The building at Winter Valley is much further away from the edge of that property. And John, there's one other point. There is a plan. We've been back and forth, but we're looking at separate options for sewer connection. If you recall, when we went through the order of conditions on the building 6 for Winter Valley, we showed the location of a sewer line that would connect from a force main on this property and connect over to the new sewer being put in place for building 6. And we've been negotiating with Winter Valley for an easement to allow that to happen. We've done all of the engineering analysis for the town, et cetera. We haven't reached agreement yet with Winter Valley. And so at the same time, we're looking at a forced main to come out the other way and tie into sewer in Spafford Road. So one way or the other, sewer will be coming up and out of the site.
All right. Would it be possible for you to put some stakes in just to give us an indication as to where the buildings are going so we can see the proximity to the property line and the proximity to the, I say the wetlands, and we're pretty familiar with where those are, but I'm really interested in proximity to the vernal pool.
Yes, we'll get back out. We know we had previously staked the corners of the buildings. We'll double check to see whether what condition those stakes are in and have them replaced if necessary.
All right. No, I'm not, I would normally wait until the end of the discussion, but do other members of the commission favor site visit?
I do, because I just like to add a comment to what we discussed before about the culvert under the entry road. It was stated that it's 24-inch. It might be increased to 36, but that a box culvert had been discarded because of increase of flooding downstream. I would just like to keep the box culvert in the discussion because it's better ecologically if you expand that stream crossing connection. And the flooding that might occur could occur in the wetlands on this site because the concrete weir that was mentioned before controls the outflow. So if a box culvert increases flooding, but only flooding on the property with minimal impact downstream, might be accommodated here.
That's not what happens. We just looked at what it is upstream. So when you open that up with a box culvert, it has a pretty significant impact on everybody downstream.
Can you describe what happens at the weir? That's the next restriction.
So, I mean, I have some photographs of it. I could probably find it, but they basically, built into the wall. The wall is a typical sort of just hand-placed fieldstone wall, but where there's an outlet, there's like some flat stones that, you know, really like construct a natural granite weir. And going beyond it, there's like a brook channel, a little stream channel that continues into the properties to the north. So all the water in this site ends up going into the vernal pool and then over this natural little stone weir. And if you want me to get pictures of it, they're hard to see. But
I have seen it myself.
Yeah.
And I imagine if you expand the culvert under the entry road, you'll have a higher elevation of water at that weir during certain storms. But that higher elevation might spread laterally instead of going over the weir all at once.
We modeled all of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we basically took the whole wetland and modeled it as a big pond. So
did you look at what's downstream of the weir where these increased flooding would happen?
Well, when we were doing our ANRAD 2 years ago, there was all those heavy rains that happened around the 4th of July, and there was a lot of water moving, you know, through those properties downstream of us to the north.
Yeah, I get it. I'm just saying it's a shame that we can't improve this crossing because of concern about impacts that might be a problem and might not be.
So to do that, we could probably put the crossing in there, but we'd have to do a pretty substantial expansion of the wetlands, which would include doing work right up to the vernal pool and everything else. And I'm just assuming we're not going to go there with that.
All right, I get it. I get the picture.
Okay. Yeah, so you're right. There's a lot of storage that happens in the wetland at the north, around the vernal pool and the wetlands around it. That's all been modeled in, you know, it's what happens after that's the control point of going off site. That was what we're looking at.
All right.
I just think that, you know, the yes, you have a nice ecological channel through here, but the consequences are pretty substantial. I'd be happy to do it, but I don't think that's what we really want. So,
right. It sounds like you would increase the peak runoff site, and that's not allowed.
We could do it, but it wouldn't end well. So,
all right. Any other questions, comments from commissioners before we open up to public questions? Hearing none, abutters, members of the public that would like to ask a question or make a comment. And I can't see any hands raised. I see Brad, your hand is raised.
Hi.
Sorry, Bart, go ahead.
No worries. Thank you, everyone. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and the discussion is very interesting. I had one question, and then I had some comments as well, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'll ask the question first and then wait.
Sure.
I think, there is some significant concern in the neighborhood about the impact on groundwater. I think we've learned throughout this process, most of us not being experts, that, a lot of steps are trying to be taken to contain runoff and to make sure things discharge on the site. But, the impact of cutting down, 230, 250 trees, whatever it is, in the middle of a wetland where, if we look at that detention area right by the road, there's 3 houses that are, a mere 20, 30 feet from there. Houses, like Teresa O'Brien and the Fioravantis at 138 Highland, Teresa at 42 Spafford, and I'm by the way from 11 Spafford, so probably about 700-800 feet down the hill, probably 20 feet lower. We're like today, for example, an all rain event, but maybe a couple of years ago would have been snow. Our sump pumps are running constantly. I can show you today, the pump in the front of my house did 500 cycles so far at around 4,192 gallons estimated. So, containing the water on the site is one thing, but, when these wetlands are so close to people's houses, this is, as a consequence of changing the land use from residential to commercial, what do we do? How can we predict what will happen to the groundwater when the water table in the entire hill? Like I said, I live 700 800 feet down the hill. And, when we dug our post and rail fence out front, the fence guys are saying, I just dug 2 feet and I hit water. The whole hill is full of water. And I think Paul mentioned there's a tremendous amount of water coming down through the site, through these streams. So I think, I hope you can appreciate that many of us, we've spent thousands on pumps and French drains and, to combat this high water table. And so we are, very concerned about, obviously the stormwater and flooding on the surface level is one thing, but the groundwater itself, most of these houses are 100 years old with either field stone or poured concrete in the early days was very coarse. It's like basically just the water passes through no problem, unless you've taken some measures to mitigate and pump that out. So yes, that's my main question is on the groundwater. And, if you look at one of these, I forget which one Paul showed where, you can see those 3 houses in particular that are right there. And then on the other side of the vernal pool on Highland, there's a series of houses, that it would be very close to all of this. So yeah, I'll pause there. And if anyone, can talk to the groundwater concern, that would be very helpful.
Is the question being asked somehow whether the groundwater on the Highland Street side of the wetland will rise as a result of this?
Yeah, what's going to happen to the water table? I think, Ned, maybe you
I think the question is that water flows downhill and will continue downhill through the site. It's not going to go up the hill and across Highland Street.
Well, I'm not talking about surface water. I'm talking about the water table underneath that goes all the way down to Reedsdale. It goes all the way down to Can't Nav from this hill. So, all the way down Spafford, people are pumping water. I can take a video of the stream that's running down Spafford Road, from people pumping water out of their basements and around their foundations. So yes, it might be 5 or 10 feet, a little bit higher at one point in the crest of the road. But the water table underneath is the concern, and that can rise as a result of this. And I think, that's what we haven't heard is there any analysis of what happens to the water table and the groundwater? Because, we're talking about significant implications for, those houses are right there and they're already pumping day and night to keep the water table at bay.
So that's a fair point, because we've been really focused in on stormwater runoff, and their obligation is to make sure that, when I say they, I'm referring to the applicant, is to ensure that there's no increase in the runoff. And you appreciate that,
yes,
I'm sure, but you've asked a different question, and that is what's going on under the surface. And we've had a number of projects lately, and we've been focused on mounding as an issue. It's like when you put a large body into a bathtub, the water goes up and over the side if the groundwater is close to the top of the bathtub. So to that extent, Paul, can you explain and give some level of confidence that the foundations that are going in, like the large body settling down into the bathtub, is not going to increase the groundwater laterally?
Well, so what's really interesting about this, that we were talking about why we were putting in a 36-inch culvert versus a 24-inch culvert, that I would think that given that we have a low-lying wetland area here where it's surface water, that the surface water, the groundwater going under Highland Street would progress, generally following the topography of the land. But for this project to have an impact on that, we would probably be a scenario whereby we were raising the level of the surface water in this wetland. The 36-inch culvert versus the 24 will help move the water out of that area and probably be a positive benefit to the extent that there's an impact on Highland Street. So, we were going back, it's like, do we want the 24 or the 36? I think there's an argument to be made that the 36 would, potentially help with groundwater issues for Island Street residents. But I today give a definitive answer. I would like to look at what the grade differences are, how deep are the basements. But I suspect that the surface waters down here in the site are below the basements on Highland Street, but I don't know that.
So,
well, do we need a mounding analysis? I know I'm asking you from the applicant side, but I'm asking you on behalf of the commission, should we be asking for a mounding analysis?
So John, before we get to that point, I think I'd like to understand under what circumstance we'd see a backup of water at the crossings. Does that make sense?
Well, you won't see one at all in the rear one because it's wider than the stream channel. So there's no bottleneck there at all with the box culvert.
And so with the one up front,
with the one up front, we would what I think I probably need to do is take the scenario. What's it look like with the 24 and what's it look like with the 36 and compare the two. Okay. But, and until we do that, I'm just sort of speculating, but if we're worried about groundwater in Highland Street, the things that we can do on our site would be, avoiding the rising level of surface water. And certainly the larger pipe would help with all of that. A box culvert would help with all of that too, but that would be at the expense of everybody to the north.
I'm sorry, say that again. It would be a big what?
Well, it'd be detrimental to everybody up north because we create an offside flooding impact. We're not allowed to do that. Those are the performance standards.
That's completely understood, and I appreciated your discussion with Tom Palmer about that. But to Hans's point, if you shrink the box culvert down to 24 inches or perhaps 36 inches, that retaining wall is going to hold water back. And does that, in addition to the foundations going in, create lateral pressure on the groundwater height to the adjoining properties?
Yeah, and the assumption is that this is a surface water groundwater interaction here. It's not independent of that.
Okay.
They're not independent, correct.
Right. Okay. So to answer those questions, I would need to go and look at, what's the elevation levels of ponding that happen in the east intermittent stream, this wetland up in here, under different storm scenarios. And until this conversation, I haven't done that. So I can't give you a definitive answer on that without looking at the numbers.
All right. Well, I think the numbers would be very helpful to the Conservation Commission, and it would be in direct response to Bart's appropriate question.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Bart, you indicated you had a question and a couple of comments. Have you made them?
And my comment in general is, around, first of all, this is a very large building here. I think people can appreciate we're talking about, something between 55,000, I think close to 60,000 square feet, which is, 50% bigger than the entire food center complex. Going in really close to, one abutter on this side, the Bacardis, but also, only, mere 120, 130 feet across the street from many houses on Highland. And we're entering an age here where, we're getting more and more precipitation. We're seeing, the value of forests. We hear in the media about, wildfires, but really, if you look at a recent Boston Consulting analysis of the destruction of forests, the top two threats they see are land use changes and global climate change. And those two things are related here. And the forests, we have some very mature heritage trees here, American beech trees that are, hundreds of years old that, very few people replant anymore because they take forever to grow. So we are, doing something very disruptive with this plan. And I would just like everyone to appreciate that. The forest here serves many purposes. Not only is it habitat, for a variety of species, it also protects us, from floods, from erosion, from, as a buffer against climate change, as the next generation sees more and more of these nor'easters becoming rain events. We've had 2 this year, which in years past would have been snowstorms. And now we're getting, instead 3 inches of rain. And I'm sure the modeling factors some of that into account, but, my dad was a civil engineer, and one of the things he taught me was water is one of the most destructive forces in nature. And what else I also do know is that right now we're battling a high water table throughout the hill. Like I said, I'm sure others, my neighbors here can attest to it, and the money they've spent to keep water out of their basements. So, it's by taking away, all this permeable land, I don't know the exact numbers, but it looks like something like, almost an acre of hardscape now, that potentially could be going in. And again, I respect, and I'm all the effort that's gone in and the modeling and the, some really impressive work, when as I'm listening and fascinated by it. But I, you can't help but stress that, we're taking away, a forest, basically, putting in a huge commercial building, which, yes, the residents don't drive, but, Northbridge have said they need between 50 and 100 employees, but, average, which is 75, regular deliveries, snow trucks, garbage, all the rest of it. They can't plow snow into the wetlands. We're looking at over 1,000 new vehicle trips a week. So you're at the same time taking away trees that clean the air for us, not just protect us from floods. So, the consequence of changing this to, from a residential to a commercial large facility like this, has significant impacts for our neighborhood. And I would just like everyone to take that into account, particularly on the groundwater issue. There is significant concern. So appreciate, any additional study and things that can be looked at to help mitigate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Bart.
Bye.
I don't see Gene now, but I saw his hand raised before. There you are. Gene Irwin. Are you there, sir? Hello, Gene.
There he
Hi,
is.
can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Okay. I have several concerns. Regarding the groundwater, can you show the other topographical map where it has Bacardi's house in it? Well, let me put it this way. There's that intermittent stream behind Bacardi's house and between Winter Valley, and there's an outflow pipe. Can you bring me to that outflow pipe? Right. Okay, right there. Now, if you follow that pipe south, well, my first question is, who owns that pipe?
There are no known easements to that pipe, so presumably the landowner owns it.
What landowner?
Milton Hospital.
Okay, but we're just talking about the opening of the pipe that you can see. The pipe continues underground south towards the Bacardis and the Wellses and Highland Lane. We need to know, I think, who owns that pipe.
But we're not disturbing it.
Huh?
We're not changing it.
Oh, I get it. But the thing is, millions of gallons of water every storm come out of that pipe. And if that pipe is altered, all your water calculations, I believe, are kaput. You don't have control of the point resource there. And you need a permit according to the Clean Waters Act for point source water. And I said, we don't even know where that water comes from 2 years later with all the engineering in the world, all the money that's spent here. You don't control the water that enters that site. And you don't know who does, apparently.
Gene, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if who alters it? If the applicant alters it or somebody upstream alters it?
Someone, I guess you call it upstream, but it's actually going south. The pipe, if you look at a bigger picture with Bacardi House, it shows it going right under the middle of their backyard and then under the Wells tennis court. And the Wells tennis court is, the lot is part of a paper street. It's likely a building will be built there someday. And so this water flow, which is in the millions of gallons, it's like a 12-inch pipe, has a capacity of like 130,000 gallons an hour. I've raised this point before with the applicants. I said, you don't have site control over the water, which is like the number one ingredient that we're all worried about at the moment. And no one even knows where the water comes from, let alone who has control of it. I believe this is part of an MS4 pre-existing non-conforming system, and that there's supposed to be easements all over this property so that the town can have the proper pollution controls for that outflow pipe.
Got it.
So I think, before we have any more meetings, I think, everything could be moot because I think the first thing the applicant has to do is prove what kind of water that is. Is it wastewater? Is it stormwater? Who controls it? And what pollution prevention controls are involved and mandatory? I've been raising this issue for 2 years, and I think we have to address it sooner or later. And I think the sooner, the better for everybody. That's just one issue. I got a myriad of issues here. We could go on a couple of days on this, so I hope.
Yeah, we can't. We got a long agenda in front of us.
I know you do.
Just bring up your points, if you would, please.
Well, my other point is, again, the knotweed. Again, how do you start? I don't know the plan on dealing with the knotweed at all. They say they're going to address it, but what does that mean?
Well, I think the notice of intent itself addresses mitigation. The details of the mitigation we haven't gotten into, but that's the point that Tom Palmer already raised. So that's an issue that's on the table. What is the mitigation plan? And the issue is whether or not it's for the whole site or just for the disturbed site. And I think Tom's request was that it go to the whole site, the whole 10 acres.
Okay, so that warrants further study. That's fine. Now I have a question. I don't know if it's appropriate at this point, but I believe there's an endangered species, i.e. the little brown bat, that occupies that lot. And what ramifications does that have? One was just caught in my neighbor's house. I had another neighbor who was bitten by a little brown bat. We have photographs of them. We have videos of them. How do you proceed on that end? It's an endangered species.
I don't know. I believe that it's not mapped as such. I could be wrong on that. And, the person who would know that is Tom Palmer. I don't believe it's mapped in that area.
I've done a little bit of research on this little brown bat. And just so most people know, most of them are in Chester, Mass, in a cave where there was a colony of 10,000. A plague has come through. It's known as the white nose syndrome. And it's wiping out 90% of these little brown bats that eat roughly up to 1,200 mosquitoes per hour. So it's great for eliminating West Nile virus, equine encephalitis. And just think, how many millions of mosquitoes just 20 bats can eat if they're eating 1,000 an hour. And they're out about 4 hours a night.
I got it. But you just said that a little brown bat was caught by one of your neighbors. And we don't know that that's the endangered species. So that's why I asked.
They are.
Gene, hold on a second. Tom, do you know if this is a mapped area for an endangered species?
I don't think it is based on the town maps I've looked at.
All right, Gene. So somebody would have to demonstrate that the little brown bat in your neighbor's house, and I'm not being facetious, but somebody would have to say that that's the endangered species. There are lots of bats around.
Well, I get it. There's two bats that don't migrate, and that's the little brown bat, and that's the big bat. So the bats that are around now are both endangered that reside in my neighborhood. And I say it may be an unmapped new species, but it's here. That's all I want to raise is that point and proper, ways to go about that.
Okay.
I know another development was stopped because of the spotted salamander. Now, I don't know if that was a mapped area or not, but again, it was an endangered species. That's my point.
Understood.
And then, if I may, on the sewer line, Ned said one way or another, it's either coming through Winter Valley or going down Spafford Road. Spafford Road was just a few years ago freshly repaved. It was sorely needed. And I don't know that the sewer line underneath it was ever repaved or repiped. And I would think if you have 100-year-old sewer line and you're pumping 400, 500 new fixtures and high velocity medical waste, if there's a blockage, a number of my neighbors, including myself probably, are going to be, drowning in raw water sewage. So I think the age and condition of that pipe needs to be explored. I think it may have to be replaced down to Reedsdale Road if they go that way, and then have to give us a new street, I believe. Same with Highland, it was just repaved.
When you're talking about medical waste, are you talking about Milton Hospital, or are you talking about this?
Well, I'm thinking all these
memory care.
I'm thinking memory care. All these memory care patients, I assume a vast majority of them are on prescription drugs, which I would think would be in their medical, or would be in their effluent.
I think every house in Milton and the Commonwealth and the United States has.
Oh, I think there's probably a higher propensity of drugs in a memory clinic than there is in the average household, just to guess. But I'll leave it to everyone else.
Gotcha. All right.
I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Gene. Minette Donovan.
There. Hi, thank you. My name's Minette Donovan. I live at 16 Spafford Road, almost across the street from Bard. And I do want to just reiterate the concerns with the water. We do have an issue, and we do everything we can to keep our basement dry. So anything that you could do to ensure and guarantee to us that things aren't going to change as a result of this, we'd appreciate, because we had no expectation when we purchased here that would be built upon as a very large, more commercial type structure. And the second thing is, I'm certainly no expert, but you all are. So I'm just going to ask, we seem to be looking at this small area, but there's a significant amount of building also occurring very close at Winter Valley. And I'm curious as to how the analysis takes into effect the change in water patterns as a result of that construction. And then I also understand that there may be a significant amount of building not too far away on Canton Avenue as well. So I think if all of this is going to occur, we can't necessarily just look at this one spot in a vacuum. I'd like to ensure that it's reviewed in terms of the additional water concerns, because it's a great concern of ours. It's a big expense. And obviously we're concerned about the trees and the and loss of the bats as a result, and any animals that reside in that area there. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time and all your work on our part.
All right, thank you, Minette. And you raise a good point. And I think that beginning with Bard and his concerns with the groundwater, we've asked the applicant to do some mounding analysis. And you're right, there are others, Winter Valley project going in, and there's a 648, 652 Canton Avenue project, and mounding is an issue there as well. So I think that the additional data from the applicant as it relates to groundwater mounding will be very important to our consideration and to your concerns. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you on the commission.
All right. Douglas Henry, your hand is raised as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Doug Henry. I represent Karen Bacardi, who is the direct abutter at 137 Highland. And I just had a couple of questions. One is, it looks like the barn and the shed are going to both be torn down that are on the first lot. I think the barn is in the wetlands now, so I think there's going to have to be some care taken in that demolition as far as wetlands go. But when we were originally looking at this a couple of years ago, and the zoning was going for the planning committee, planning board, there was talk about doing an environmental site assessment for some concrete that was down by the barn, which is in the area that I think is where the replicated wetlands going to be built. And I think the applicant said they were going to study that area. I don't know if they've done that yet, but I think that needs to be done if you're putting a wetland in an area that they said they were going to do some analysis on. Remember, there was poured concrete where the old house came out, and there was some discussion by some of the neighbors that there might have been an environmental issue there. I don't know if it's ever been looked at. The other point I'd like to make is there are a number of underground pipes that go from the intermittent stream over to the vernal pool, including some manholes, and the analysis says, or the notice of intent says, those are not going to be disturbed. I just wonder whether those will have any impact on the flow or the groundwater, because I think some of those actually carry some of the stream at this point in time. So that may need to be looked at. And I guess the final question is, I know Tetra Tech has been engaged by the planning board for peer review, and it sounds like they have had some discussions with the applicant on water flow issues. And I'm just wondering whether the planning board will have the benefit of that Tetra Tech analysis as part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. And your memory is good, because when we met on site, we did have an opportunity to look at that concrete that seemed to have been dumped there. And I know there was a discussion at the time, gee, is that covering an underground storage tank? And at the time, I think we said we're here for the delineation of the wetlands, and that the condition of the site, if there were some contamination, would be addressed at the notice of intent. And here we are at the notice of intent. And I don't know, Ned, I think you were present at that site walk as well. Is there any investigation as to A, whether or not there was an underground storage tank in the area of that concrete, and B, I assume it's part of the process, your process, that you would remove that concrete in any event?
That's correct. I don't know whether, I don't believe there was an underground storage tank, but I don't have any evidence one way or the other. I don't think there's any indication that there are environmental issues coming from that concrete. My understanding is that that concrete was poured to fill the hole, or some of the hole was created when that dwelling at 107 Highland Street came down. That came down under a separate order of conditions that was issued by the Conservation Commission, I think in 2019. But absolutely, we would be responsible for making sure that whatever work gets done is compliant with all necessary environmental regulations.
Ned, have any environmental due diligence or environmental site assessments been completed for the site? Maybe the type that are done for, transaction review?
Yes, the hospital had done a preliminary environmental site assessment. There was nothing in it that indicated any issues. There was no phase 2 that I'm aware of, but a phase 1 report was done and was evaluated as part of the transaction.
Ned, could you submit that phase 1 site assessment to the Conservation Commission?
Sure, I'll check in with the hospital on that. Whatever they have, I will secure it and get it to the commission.
All right, thanks. Doug, you mentioned the manholes would be left untouched. Paul, could you comment on that concern?
Sure, we didn't, all those manholes are beyond the limits of work. We don't, we haven't gone into the wetlands to try to evaluate them. We're not planning to do anything with them. There are no known easements. We're just treating them as artifacts of prior uses of the site. And, they are what they are, and don't foresee that anything we are doing here would be affected by them one way or the other.
All right, and there was a, I'm struggling with this one because I know that Gene brought up the issue of the pipes, and I don't know if those manholes are, part of that same pipe system that he was concerned with. My memory is when we were doing the first ANRAD and delineating the wetlands, that there was concern with what was upstream. And my memory is that nobody knew. Gene, I think you're right. I don't know where that water is coming from. But I maybe we could talk to the town engineer, and I think someone has already done that. And I don't know if Marina is still on. I don't think she is. But I didn't know if there was any way that the town had any existing plans that would show the source of that water. And I don't know if that's tied to Gene's point and Doug's point about the manholes. But it's clear, I think Paul answered the question, that those manholes are outside the limit of work and they're not touching it. It's just elsewhere in the property. But I wonder if there's any town data that would show where those pipes originate from. That's something that we can ask, and I will ask Marina Fernandez if the town has any drainage documents that would show the origin of those pipes. And then, Doug, I think you had a third point that I didn't write down.
I was just wondering whether the Tetra Tech peer review that the planning board is getting whether the Conservation Commission would have the benefit of that analysis as part of this process, or if you're going to have your own peer review done of this project.
Well, that might be necessary, but let me ask Ned, do you have that Tetra Tech analysis, and is that something that you could submit to us?
We'll be happy to. It has not been submitted yet to the planning board. My conversation with Tim Zerwinski, the town planner, as of earlier today, was that they were expecting it soon, but did not know when it would be in. We start a separate hearing with the planning board on Thursday night. We're expecting to go this Thursday and then probably the 30th and again into April. So once it's available, it's a public document. I don't have any issue with sharing it with the commission. It's under the purview of the planning board.
Yeah, I think there's some overlap between what the planning board is getting for the special permit and what you're looking at. So it might be helpful for you to have the benefit of that analysis.
We have no concerns about the commission getting access to that peer review report. Would be happy to share it. As I said, it's really, I think the request is properly to Tim Zerwinski because it's a report that's being prepared for the planning board under a contract that they have with the town. We're certainly anxious to see it. We think it obviously will be informative on their overview of the work that we've done. And you're right, there's the stormwater report, the same document is being reviewed by both the commission and the planning board.
So Doug, I will take it upon myself to call Tim Zerwinski to close the loop on that, to make sure that we get a copy of that. I think it's a fair point, and more data is usually good.
Yeah, we have no problem. We certainly have no problem with the planning department releasing it to the commission.
Thank you.
Okay. So I will follow up with Tim on that piece, and for Gene's benefit, I will follow up with Marina Fernandez to see if we can get, or Chase Berkeley perhaps, to see if we can get any drainage plans that show the origin of the water that traverses through the property. Again, it's more data. It's not that the alteration is not being done by this applicant, but I hear you, Gene, that if somebody else was making an alteration at the same time, it could have an impact, and it's worthwhile pursuing the origin of the water.
One more point about that, John. I would say that on page 4 of the narrative, first complete paragraph, it says, the manhole structure near the north end of the western intermittent stream will be removed. I think we heard that those manholes wouldn't be disturbed, but here we see one will be removed. So I think there's a little...
Wait, where's that?
Page 4 of the notice of intent narrative prepared by Oak Consultant Group.
So what, the first full paragraph, that's talking about the driveway culvert.
Says, well, no, the western intermittent stream is the other side. The eastern is the driveway culvert. That's the manhole that's mentioned there.
Oh yeah, that's the manhole there's a manhole that has to come out because that's where the new box culvert's going, but that's not the outfall pipe that Gene Irwin was talking about.
Yeah, it's part of the same mysterious network.
Okay. Yep, right? Yep. So that's the one that gets altered, but the rest of them, yep, you're right. Okay.
All right, good. Thanks for the clarification. All right, so I think that we've got our work cut out for us, and let me go back to the commission and ask whether or not there's an appropriate date that's convenient for all to do a site visit. But I say that in deference to either Paul or Ned to see whether or not we can get just the corners of the buildings staked so we can see the proximity to the property line and be able to figure out whether or not we've got sufficient ground for tree coverage.
We can get right back out on that. The corners were previously staked. They might have been moved slightly as the building has been designed since the zoning was approved a year ago. But we can get on that. Our assumption is that you'd be looking at either the 25th or perhaps April 1st as dates for site walk. And we'd like to invite the planning board, whatever day that would be.
I have a conflict on the 25th, so would have a strong bias to the 1st if that works.
Well, April 1st that's a Saturday, right? I don't have a calendar in front of me.
That's right.
Yeah.
That would work for me. So let me go through here. Would it work for, let me start. Steve Ivis, I see you. Are you available?
Yes.
And Tom Palmer, you available April 1st?
Yeah, I think so.
Wendy?
Unfortunately, I'm not, John. I'm actually not available for the next few Saturdays.
All right. Hans, how about you?
What was the date? I'm sorry.
April 1st.
I believe I am. Yes.
Perfect. Then why don't we set that up? And that'll give you sufficient time, Ned and Paul and company, to make sure those stakes are in place. So we would meet. What's the best place to meet?
Right at 107, where the house used to be.
Got it. Okay.
In the middle, I'll invite the planning board.
Yeah, oh, that's perfect. Right. Yeah, we'll both announce it as a public meeting. So for the public's benefit, you're invited. Assuming we have your permission to enter the land, Ned?
Yes.
So April 1st, Saturday morning, 8:30 a.m. And we'll meet where the old house used to be at 107 Highland.
Right.
Okay. All right. That's great. Thanks to all very much for your patience with us.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. And we've really got to pick up some speed here. So we are now up to notice of intent 114 Hillside Street.
Hi, good evening. This is Gabriel from Grady Consulting.
Oh, great. Thanks.
I am. Hi. Can I share my screen here real quick so you can see the plan? So we are proposing an addition to an existing house. It's a single-family home. The addition is within the 50-foot wetland buffer. Pretty much the whole site is within the 50-foot buffer. So we placed all the work as far away as we could from the wetland area. And there's also Cook's Brook that goes down this area. We have the riverfront area marked here this way and marked here. So the work, as well as being within a buffer zone, it's also within the riverfront area. There is no work proposed within the 100 riverfront area, except for the planting areas here. Following regulations, we wanted to do these mitigation areas as close as we could from the river itself. So we have the restoration areas in these pockets, which right now is grass area. The system we use for groundwater recharge is a stone bed with perforated pipes. It's a very, very shallow system, and it's pretty much going to be placed where the existing elevation is now. It's 10 feet away from the structure, from the proposed structure. We are also proposing a crushed stone parking area right next to the existing driveway. So that's the only extension that we would have on the driveway itself. There is a construction entrance that we have provided at the entrance of the lot, along with a silt sock that goes all around the lot, cutting through the wetland line, and all along the eastern side, the western side of the lot. There is an existing shed. There is no work proposed in that area. There is pretty much no work proposed beyond the 100-foot riverfront area. And the same thing with the no-touch zone. So if you see the no-touch zone is close to the addition, but we are still outside that no-touch zone. Everything else is existing. Let me pull up the existing plan. And that's how it looks at the moment, which is all grass, driveway, planter shed, and the single family home itself within the buffer. Are there any
I may have had this backwards. I thought what I was looking at here was that's the existing. I thought that was the addition.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I pretty much showed them backwards, but yes, this is the existing condition and this is the proposed addition. I can put them side by side if that would help.
Yeah, if you could, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay, can you see it now? Both plans side by side.
Yes. So one of the things that threw me off was the line where the existing house is. I thought you said a 50-foot non-disturbance zone, but it's actually, that's the 25-foot non-disturbance zone, correct?
25, yep.
But the darker brown is the addition.
That is correct.
A replication or restoration areas.
Sorry, restoration areas.
So I'm not sure what you're restoring. That's already within our 25-foot non-disturbance. So,
well, it has already been disturbed. It's grassed area, so we want to try to restore it to pretty much wetland plantings.
all right, so that's not compensation for something, or is it?
Well, the existing, I have here a breakdown. The existing alteration, the alteration of the whole lot is almost 20,000 square feet. And then the proposed alteration, it leaves us with 18,584 square feet of altered area. And that's considering the areas that we're restoring. So we have a riverfront, the area of the site within the riverfront is 43,000 square feet, which by regulation, you can alter up to 10% or 5,000, whichever is greater. In this case, 5,000 square feet is greater. And so the allowable addition, we left it at 2,078 square feet. And it was all within previously developed areas. So we are not altering the riverfront area that was already disturbed.
Could I make a remark about that?
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, I'm looking at the narrative that was submitted with the application. And the last page of the narrative has these numbers. Says that the proposed work does not exceed the amount of degraded area. The lot has 43,000 square feet of riverfront area, and the degraded area within the riverfront area is 19,000. And I think that figure 19,000 for degraded is a little big, because according to the regulations, degraded means rooftops or paved areas, not grass. But here lawn is being counted as degraded area, and I don't think that's correct. I think when you're talking about degraded, you have to talk about impervious. So I think if you're counting up the degraded area existing condition, it's not going to be 19,000 square feet. It'll be smaller than that. How that affects the other calculations, I'm not sure, but I do appreciate that they have tried to move the work away from Cooks Brook.
In any case, the allowable disturbance would be 5,000 square feet. The addition itself is 2,000 square feet. So we're still below that threshold.
So you're saying that you're using the whichever is greater fork of some kind, saying that at any rate 5,000 is okay.
Well, if the regulations state you could disturb up to 5,000 square feet of undisturbed area. If we go by that metric of not counting the lawn towards the disturbed area, we are allowed to disturb up to 5,000 square feet, which is above the proposed addition that we are.
Yeah, you're also doing some disturbance in the driveway too, right?
The driveway itself, we're just adding some crushed stone parking, so it would still be pervious.
Yes.
So it's a small patch, but the driveway itself stays the same.
I hear you. I'm not kind of through my thinking on this yet, but I hear what you're saying.
I'd like to take a look at it. What do you know? When was the primary house, the existing house, built?
I would have to look up that information, but
I could tell you that.
You go ahead. Tell us.
My name's Ted Ahern. I'm the owner of the property. It was built in 1951. The reason we know that is the guy had his children put their handprints in there. They wrote 1951. This house was built.
All right. Now, I was just looking to see if it was before or after 1996. So 51 is before 96, I think. So I got you. So you answered my question. That's the riverfront passage date as to whether or not it was. It has to do with what you can do in the inner riparian zone, the outer riparian zone. Sorry. So you answered the question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wendy, did you have a thought? Question?
No, I have nothing to add. Thank you, John.
Okay. Well, in terms of the degraded, because I'm trying to figure out what are we getting here in the restoration areas. I'd like to take a look at it. Am I correct that is this one that does not have a DEP number? Anybody know?
Yes, it does not. It does not have a DEP number. I'm sorry. No, it does have a DEP number. This is 046-0626.
I'm sorry, 046.
0626.
Thank you.
And the DEP comments do say that 310 CMR 10.58 parentheses 5 parentheses A through parentheses H criteria have not been addressed in the documentation.
You're going to have to help me out with A through H.
Well, there's a series of performance standards that they have to go through. That's all. So they need to address those in writing. They also need to do an alternatives analysis for the riverfront work. And they also need to tell us why the driveway is in the 25. The additional driveway is in the 25 no disturb zone.
Now I'm really lost. Where is it?
If you look at the top of the green.
I was focused in on Cook's Brook, so I should be looking at
look on the other
delineation.
side. There's a wetland line, which I have not seen, by the way, just yet. But there's a wetland line at the very top of the page, which would be toward the east.
Gotcha.
And then the 25-foot zone is basically a semicircle, and that's where they're putting the driveway.
All right, Gabrielle, do you know who or when or both? Who and when was that delineation made?
The delineation of this wetland. Let's see, I have it here. Brad Holmes on October 11th, 2022.
Okay, so that's recent enough. I would suggest we do a site walk if that's anybody else think we need one?
Yes.
All right, because if it's in the 25 foot, that's an issue for us. And if DEP's got comments that you want to A through H, that would be another issue. And we've agreed to meet at Highland Street at 8:30. I suspect that would be at least an hour on Saturday the 1st, but we could be at your house by 9:45. Is that acceptable to you? That's both to Ted and to Gabrielle as well. Ted, especially because it's your house.
Yeah, it's okay with me.
Good. Okay.
And it's okay with me.
All right, good. So why don't we do that? If we'll continue with your assent, we'll continue this until it'll be a public meeting. And hopefully you'll be able to address A through H at that time. Then we can take a look at this area of the driveway that's in the non-disturbance zone.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Are there any questions or comments first from any other commissioner? And seeing none, abutters or members of the public? Hearing none, then we'll continue this until April 1st.
Excuse me, no, I've got a comment. I'm Terry Ray.
Sure, Terry, go ahead.
The butter, just between the property and Highland. Our concern is there has been no mention of a septic system. We're aware that the small house had a big problem with the septic system. They put one in 20 years ago. As I understand, I wasn't here. I've been here for 10 years. And for the first 2 years, they tried to make it work and could not. So they ended up with a tight septic tank, which had to be emptied quite often. And there were only 2 people living in there. I guess it's a 2-bedroom, designated a 2-bedroom home, but to go from 2 bedrooms to 5, and I don't see how that tank can handle that amount of sewage. Perhaps that's addressed in the items A through H.
No, sir, it is not.
I do want to go on record.
Sure. Either Ted or Gabrielle, do you have a quick response to that? Going from 2 to 5 is a significant change in terms of sewage output.
We were told that Gabriel.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Raher.
So we were told when the property was for sale that they had already submitted a plan to the town of Milton for, to upgrade the septic system to a new septic system. I don't know any further about any other information other than that.
Well, if it would probably come before us. I'm trying to remember if we've been out. I thought we had been at 114 in the past, but that goes back a long time, and it's certainly not. I don't remember a septic system there within the last 10 years. But if you could check with the planning board to see whether or not there's been a change, because that's a fair point. Going from 2 beds to 5 beds is a significant change, and that would, if it's a tight tank that's emptied on a regular schedule already, you're going to increase in frequency by a lot if you go from 2 to 5. And it shouldn't be an issue, but maybe we ought to take a look. Wait, do you know where the septic system is currently? Your tanks?
I don't. I was told it was behind the house where the grass is greenest.
Great.
Yeah, no, that's what the guy told us.
Okay. How long have you been there, Ted?
No, we just bought it about 6 months ago.
Okay.
So currently, there's nobody residing in the house.
All right, Gabriel, can you assist on this? I mean, do you have access to some of the records either at the Board of Health?
I will check with the Board of Health to see if they have anything. I believe we went through the process, but even though, should have gone, but I can definitely take a look at all that.
All right. Steve, do you know, maybe you could ask Kathy to just run this, because I don't recall a permit within the last 10 years.
And there hasn't been a permit in the last 5 years, I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to.
All right, if you could check with Kathy.
All right, well, either way, we'll address it and make sure that it's getting corrected.
All right, good. And then we'll Terry, did you have anything else?
No, sir.
All right, then we'll have it's part of a public meeting. So Terry, assuming it's okay to enter upon your land, Ted.
Yep, anytime.
All right, we'll have a meeting at probably about, I'm guessing here, 9:45. Hopefully, so we can get there at so somewhere before 10 o'clock. We'll be at your house on Saturday, April 1st. All right.
Great. Thank you very much.
Perfect. All right. Thanks all.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is Central Avenue, Turner's Pond.
And that's me.
Oh, great. Can you tell us what your project is?
So I'm Jane Gibbs. I'm representing the Amateur Gardeners of Milton, and we have been a garden club for 70 years, and we're in the process of dissolving. So we would like to commemorate all the work we've done for the town over the 70 years, and we would like to put a granite bench, and it will have an inscription on it that mentions that it is commemorating all the members for the past 70 years. There's a lot of places around town that we maintain, and we've done a lot of work for the town. So we'd just like to commemorate everybody.
Gene, it sounds like a great idea, but why in the world are you dissolving after 70 years?
Unfortunately, it's like most clubs. I've been the president so many times, and nobody will step up.
Oh, that's a shame.
It's an awful shame, yes.
So, and you have taken care of, I can never pronounce the Martha Curtis corner, your Hercules or whatever it is. Do you take care of that corner as well at Brook and Jan Avenue?
We take care of the trough at Algerine in advance. We take care of the entrance to Town Hall and the entire apron in front of the gazebo. We take care of the entrance at 138, where the big rock is. We distribute Christmas wreaths. We do the Christmas decorations at the gazebo. So, yes, it's come to an end. We also contribute 3 $1,000 scholarships to Milton High students every year. It's in concert with our mission, something with the environment, something with horticulture, floriculture. So, yes.
Wow, I'm dumbfounded. Wendy, do you have any ideas on how to reinvigorate some energy and enthusiasm into the garden club?
We've been trying this. The other Milton Garden Club is still in existence.
Okay.
We're the amateur gardeners of Milton.
And the others, I'm not being a wise guy. The others are pros, or what's the difference?
Well, apparently 70 years ago, there were some women who didn't quite cut it to be admitted to the Milton Garden Club. So they decided to, tongue-in-cheek, create another garden club and call themselves the Amateurs. And we were actually okay with that.
Sandinistas. All right. Well, I salute you for being president so often and 70, not your 70 years of service, but for the whole club. But where would this commemorative bench be placed?
So one of the members did walk around Turner's Pond with Kevin Chisholm, and directly, my understanding is that directly through the entrance on Central Ave, a little bit to the left, would be where the bench would be.
And John, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, that will be the north, I would say the north extent of Turner's Pond, right where I am circling right now. Okay. And
sounds good.
Another place is here. It's a little bit more focused in, zoomed in.
All right. No, I know the area well. It sounds like an appropriate location for a stone bench commemorating the garden club. Are there any comments or questions from commission members?
We have notified all the abutters.
Are there any abutters that have a question or a comment?
Not that I know of.
Okay, I would assume it would be enthusiastically endorsed. So this is a request for determination of applicability. I would suggest a negative determination. And who's going to put it in? Because I know that the base has to be prepared. So there has to be some scraping and evening of or leveling of the ground to place the bench.
Yes, we've already worked with the Parks and Recs and the DPW, and they're going to work with us on that.
Perfect. Well, it sounds like an appropriate negative determination. The only condition I can think of is that when the ground is leveled by the DPW or Parks or whoever does it, that there be some mechanism to prevent any sedimentation or erosion going into the pond. I assume it can be done very quickly. And Steve, what's the best way to ensure that there's no erosion into the pond?
Probably just one set of, a 20-foot long silt sock. Just one silt sock. You can buy them at 20-foot lengths easily. That would be my suggestion.
I know that Kevin Chisholm has spoken to her about installing it, so I know he has an idea of what we need to do.
All right.
Might I suggest I chat with him about it, John?
Yes, right. But I think for purposes of tonight, we could endorse a negative determination contingent solely upon the use of appropriate erosion controls.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes. Hey, welcome.
Thank you. I've been listening in and out for about a half an hour now, and I just wanted on this one to say this is very similar to the situation for the John Cronin bench that will be installed in the spring. And the Parks Department is on top of everything that needs to be done to make sure that everything is properly installed, so they can just transfer that experience right to this particular bench as well. So they'll be in good shape.
Oh, that's excellent. And is there a coordination in terms of location?
There are two different locations, so they're in complementary locations. One is down toward the end of the pond. That's where the Cronin bench is going. Yep. just to the right of where your cursor, left of where your cursor is. So it's nice to have benches in different areas.
Perfect, makes good sense. And we can salute both John Cronin and the 70 years of service by the Amateur Garden Club.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, so is there a motion to issue a negative determination with the one condition of appropriate erosion controls?
So moved.
All right, thanks. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Tom. Any discussion? All in favor, roll call. Tom?
Aye.
Wendy?
Yes.
Hans?
Yes.
Arthur?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, John Kiernan. That unanimous. Thank you very much, Gene. That was, I think it's a great idea, and I look forward to seeing it and having the public enjoy it.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Next on the agenda is number 6, request for determination of applicability, 0 Truman Parkway near Concord Avenue. Do we have the applicant?
There's Dan Canada, I'm an environmental scientist at PHP, here representing Department of Conservation and Recreation. With me, I have Shanta Keller, who's the project engineer and project manager. Also Stella Lensing, John Patton, and Jennifer Munis from DCR. Would it be possible for me to share my screen just for scrolling purposes, or is this?
Of course, that's great, Dan. Thank you.
Great. All right. Everyone see that?
Yes.
All right. So thank you, everyone. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, commissioners. This is an RDA filing for proposed archaeological exploration test pits to facilitate the design of a future potential pedestrian bridge project proposed by DCR at this location. Just to orient folks, this is along Brush Hill Road or Truman Parkway, and this is right near the intersections with Concord Avenue, Deeper Street, and for reference across the Neponset River is Osceola Street in Boston. So again, here's our proposed site plan, Boston across the river and faded out there. 6 hand-dug test pits are proposed, all outside of the 25-foot notice strip zone. They are located within the 100-foot buffer to bank associated with the river, and also within the riverfront area as well that is offset from the high water.
Dan, you're fading out a little bit. It's hard to hear you.
I was having issues with my headset. Is this a little better now?
Yeah, try it again.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, but you're still fading.
Sorry about that. Let's see.
Can you go back? How many of the test pits are there? 6?
There are 6, yep, and they are all approximately 2 feet by 2 feet. None of them would be more than 3 feet deep.
I'm sorry, how deep?
3 feet.
3 feet, okay.
And just to give a little idea of what they'd look like, very rudimentary, just simple hand shovel dug, square shape.
And how long will they remain open?
The entire process of this will take 2 days total before they're, the archaeologists will analyze the soils in the area, see if there's anything of note, and then collect their samples as needed, and then also just backfill the test pit sites and restore them at the that they currently are.
So to the extent this is a recreational area, what do you do overnight with the holes? How do you protect against some child, running by and falling in?
So these will be off of the actual trail area. I can actually show you the specific location. And this is right adjacent to an area where a geotechnical boring was taken, also to inform the bridge design. That was done last summer. So this is not really in an area that says inviting for people to currently walk into at this time. A little off of the actual path.
And it's an area that's full of briars.
I still feel more comfortable if there was a cover put on a 3-foot hole that's 2 by 2 by 3 feet deep. Why couldn't you?
So Shanta, would you be able to maybe speak to this a little bit? But I believe the intent is to excavate and then backfill within the same day. But just given the fact that there are 6 test pits, that's why it's going to take more than 1 day's effort.
Yeah, that's great. My only concern was I didn't want to leave them open overnight.
Gotcha. Yeah, I totally understand that. But yeah, the plan would be to complete each pit within a day. So not have the opening.
All right. All right, that makes sense. Now, I'm always very interested in the archaeological digs. Is this one of those situations where we can't find out what was found, or if we do find out what was found, you can't tell us where it is?
I will defer to the rest of the team on that.
That might be a good question for JP if you're on. We produce a report, and we have a sub-consultant who specializes in this. Gray and Pape Heritage Management will be performing the digs. And they compile a report for the project. And there is through the Mass Historic Commission, I know there's a project file, and it becomes part of that file. I don't know what is public versus what kind of gets issued, or as far as that report.
All right, it's a separate issue, and it doesn't necessarily impact it, but we've had some dealings with natural heritage in the past. And sometimes I've been told, well, we found some stuff, but we can't tell you where it was, because if we told you where it was, then people would know, and they'd go, and there's a risk that, Indian artifacts or something would be at risk. But it's more curiosity. It doesn't affect the RDA.
John, I'd be happy to speak to this point, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So yeah, DCR archaeologists, we would be working with the Milton Historical Commission as a consulting party, and they would be provided a copy of the report. I'm sure they'd be happy to share it with you as necessary.
Oh, sure. That's good, John. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, typically the methodology that we use in the field is that one of these 2 people dig one of these test pits every half an hour. They immediately cover them back up once they're sampled and photographed, and backfill to existing grade. Typically, they put the sod cap back right on top of where they are. You can't even see them after a day or so.
That's perfect. Yeah, my concern was safety only, that it didn't. Yep. It was
Ours
not
too.
open overnight. Good.
Ours too. Yep.
All right. Something to do with OSHA violations or something. All right. Thank you very much. Any questions from commissioners?
I would like to mention that I know the area, and have you dug any holes there yet?
We haven't done any of these hand digging holes yet, but we did a geotechnical boring, just a drill hole in doing the subsurface investigation. We had
Was it obvious to you?
Oh,
I didn't mean to interrupt, but was it obvious to you that this is recent fill?
I think we do expect fill here.
Yeah, there was a channelization project in the 60s. That's why the banks all through here are flat and usually the same elevation, and then drop off steeply where the bank is armored near the high water mark. And most of that fill was taken out of the channel and placed on the banks so that the channel could discharge a certain amount of water. So I would say that all along that strip between Truman Parkway and Neponset, all of those banks where they're flat now are fill dating from the 60s So I think you're likely to find archaeological things, but they may not be in a useful context if they are lifted out of the channel and placed as fill. That's just a thought. I'm curious myself what you might find.
Well, we'll see if the historical commission will share the findings. All right, thank you very much. Any comments from abutters, members of the public? If not, I suggest that we issue a negative determination. This is RDA, and the sole condition is that the holes not be left open overnight. Is there such a motion?
I move
John,
that
one more.
Yes.
One more condition.
Yes.
That we just know when they're being done. That's all. A call is made to Kathy.
Makes sense. That's part of the motion, Tom?
Sure.
All right. Is there a second?
A second.
Thanks, Wendy. Any discussion? Hearing none. Tom, how do you vote?
Yes.
Wendy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Hans, how do you vote?
Yes.
Arthur, sir, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. John Kiernan. Unanimous. Thank you very much for your patience with us tonight, and thank you for your good work.
Thank
Bye,
you. Good
everyone.
night.
All right. Good night, all. Next, we go to Notice of Intent 9 Myers Lane. Thank you. Who is presenting this tonight? I can't see anybody, so somebody might be on mute. Steve, do you know?
Is it David? And I'm sorry, I've forgotten his last name. David Corbett. And I've been emailing him all day today. He's had some issues with the DEP. He still doesn't have a number. They've cashed his check, but he doesn't have a number yet. And Alicia thinks that it went to the wrong office. That's the person who is the
the circuit rider?
Circuit rider, yes, thank you. Yep.
Yeah, and she's pretty responsive.
Yes.
I know he's come to us with several plans over the last several months. So it must be very frustrating for him to submit the check, have it cashed, and still no numbers. So we can't vote on anything, but we'd have to, I have in my hand the deck and the 25-foot buffer from the flood zone. But
And
I
can
really
you
don't
see it on the screen, John?
I can, but I'm not really sure. This has been moved around so many times now. I'm not sure what he's planning here.
Right.
This is
I
dated
understand.
February 17th.
Right. Might I suggest we take this up in our next
Regular meeting in April.
next regular
yes.
meeting? Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Where are you reading that date from?
Just above the red says revision.
Right here.
It looks like the garage is gone and now it's a deck.
Yes, over an existing roof, and the asphalt is going to be replaced with gravel. Asphalt in this area.
All right.
So the deck of the existing roof and an asphalt. I think we can dispatch with this very quickly at our next meeting, John.
Okay.
Maybe
yeah,
you'll have a DEP number by then too.
I agree. All right, so we'll put this over until the April meeting. Not
Yes.
the April 1st site walk, but the regularly scheduled. I don't know what the date is. Do you know? Is it the? It can't be the 14th because I think we've had the 14th of February and the 14th of March. It couldn't possibly be the same.
No, it's April 11th, John.
April 11th. Good. All right. Thank you. Would you mind just alerting David Corbett of this?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda is 8 and 9. I'm sorry, 8 we already know has been continued. 9 and 10 I think is continued, but I should ask whether or not there's a, I think that's Joe Federico. I didn't receive any notice from him today, but my understanding is he's asking for a continuance of these two lots. He's still talking to the folks at, is it MIPA? I'm not sure where he is.
Natural Heritage.
Natural Heritage.
Natural Heritage. Okay. All right. So we'll continue those 3 to April 11th. The 3 being 8, 9, and 10, which takes us to number 11, which is notice of intent 648, 652 Canton Avenue. And to the applicants team, thank you for your patience.
No problem at all. Happy to be here with the commission again. For the record, Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates, representing the applicant for 652 Canton Avenue. Just jumping right into it, I know it's fairly late in the evening. I guess the refresher is when last we met with the commission, which I guess was back in January, we had a healthy and robust discussion on the application. We had received some information from GZA, and the way we left it is we were going to get a follow-up review to the information that we had provided back to GZA and engage in further correspondence with them on the application with your town's peer review consultant. We had provided some response package information the week before last. And I believe your consultant submitted a letter today that we were copied on via email. So we have that in front of us on our team side. So at the direction of the commission, of course, I guess we could talk about that peer review. I believe your consultant is on the call as well, if you wanted to hear from him, or otherwise we can walk through anything that you'd like to talk about this evening. In quick summary, the last round of revisions, we have 2 comments that I guess are open as a result of GZA. Everything else is noted as satisfactorily addressed and responded to. But at the pleasure of the commission, we can talk through whatever you'd like this evening.
Well, maybe for the public's benefit, we should go through and just sort of in the short version, go through those comments that are agreed upon, at least from the GZA perspective, that they have no further comments, and just in short form, and then let's go to the 2 that remain as matters of controversy.
Sure. Just so very briefly, there were just a handful of remaining outstanding comments, and I'll just go through them. I don't know if do we want to bring them up on the screen. Let me see. Can do that if that helps the group to follow it.
It might, and it may be that it would be appropriate to bring in the GZA letter because that would be the sort of the final version. Or we can go to your March 7th one if you want.
Well, let me, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I will bring up the GZA letter just because that is the end all to it, and it replicates in our comments as well, so you can see the before and the after, so to speak.
That makes sense, Phil. Thank you.
Sure. So let me share the screen. Okay. And I have that up on the screen confirming everybody is able to see that. And just jumping into it quite succinctly. So comment 2, what GZA, the consultant, had asked us to do is verify that all of our runoff from the site was being captured and that we were handling the appropriate required recharge volume for the site because they astutely noted that small areas of our site were not captured. So they asked us to just confirm that we were meeting the stormwater regulations with regard to the quantity of and handling of stormwater runoff. So we provided them this table of breakdown based on watershed areas on the application to denote the impervious area within each watershed, the required recharge volume based on that impervious area, and then the storage volume within our stormwater BMP that would handle that volume. The end all to it is that we are required to recharge 13,300 cubic feet, of which our systems provide accommodations for 21,036 cubic feet, so greater than the minimum required. Dare say the GZA addressed. GZA has no further comment as their summary to that issue. Comment number 3, we were talking similarly about water quality storage volume within our underground system of chambers on the site. They had asked us through the previous application to clarify how the water quality volume was met in those chambers. And again, we had a healthy discussion during the meeting. We subsequently provided this volumetric table that's on the screen now for each of our underground infiltration systems, which note what the impervious area is draining to each of those systems, what the required water quality volume would be based on a 1/2 inch runoff, the storage volume that's available in the chambers, and then how many chambers we would need to meet that water quality storage volume. So the reason we provided this information in the manner that we did is we obviously have a very large chamber system underneath the parking lot. And what we would be required to do is make sure that the minimum number of chambers is allocated for sediment removal and storage of water to remove that sediment. And the way we laid it out here in this comment, and certainly back to our discussion back at the meeting in January, is that when we go to final design on these systems, we will uniquely identify the isolator rows that will meet this standard requirement. And we would make sure that that construction level detailing come back in front of the commission for record just to ensure that we've complied with these numbers. And again, GZA is noted here, addressed in their opinion, and GZA has no further comment to that. Comment 4, page 3/4 of the letter. They had asked us to confirm how total suspended solids was addressed on site with specific focus to a water quality swale, a quote, water quality swale that occurs on the southeast property line. And what we responded to GZA with is documentation of how TSS is handled on site, and that we are using a balance equation for the site, meaning some areas of the site are treated for greater than 80% TSS and some areas are treated less. It is a provision in the stormwater management standards that as long as the aggregate of those weighted areas meet certain conditions and meet the aggregate of 80% total suspended solid removal, we therefore meet that standard. And we provided those calculations in terms of the area that we have draining to each of the BMPs on site and the anticipated removal from them. And what that allowed us to do is to really change the terminologies rather than referring to the swale along the southern property line as a water quality swale, which requires certain design standards to meet TSS removal. We actually rolled that back and was simply referring to it as a drainage conveyance swale, which provides no TSS removal, but because the site as a whole, as an aggregate, meets those standards of 80% TSS in the aggregate, we can meet the stormwater management standards. And again, I'll fast forward to the bottom comment by GZA addressed. The applicant is no longer requiring on the proposed water quality swale for TSS removal, and has accordingly reduced the TSS removal efficiency for landscape depression 1 from 94 to 80%. And GZA has no further comment. So our next two comments, comment 6, they were asking for some elaboration on the estimated seasonal high groundwater table below the stormwater system BMPs that are on site. And we provided a tabular summary to them and some additional information regarding the water table as how we calculated it. So what we provided back to them is a graphic of the site, and I'm just switching off of the letter for a moment. This was included in the package back to the commission. This graphic identified the various individual underground stormwater systems by sub-entity, meaning the system as a whole was called infiltration system 2, but each one was identified as a subset A, B, C, and so forth. We also provided just a highlight of where testing was done, on-site soil testing, and then interpolated groundwater conditions on the site based on the results of the test pits that were performed on the property. And the intent there is to make sure that we can affirm to this commission, to the applicants, to the commission's consultant, that we do in fact meet the 2 foot of separation below each of these systems. Jumping back to the letter, what Stephen pointed out, what GZA had pointed out, is some areas that could stand some additional clarity in terms of how we purport that we meet those separations. And they provided these ongoing comments, letters A through E. And within those, and keeping in mind, we just got this afternoon, we can certainly provide responses to one of these comments and still maintain our position. In general, what's happening on the site is the site slopes. And jumping back to the graphic on the screen, we have a general high point in the groundwater, and then it slopes in a westerly direction, and a northerly direction towards Canton Avenue, and then a southerly direction towards the 652 side of the property. So what we did is we wanted to make sure that we denoted what that sloping water table condition was, and that's how we arrived at the contours that are on the screen, but also the 2 foot of separation. So what we were able to do, obviously having all of the data in front of us and the AutoCAD systems, is go through on a point-by-point basis and check each location and confirm that where we have a system, we identify what the bottom of the stone is, and then we can identify what the water table is based on that interpolation. Some of our data apparently is a little unclear to GZA in terms of what we did and how we calculated it, but we certainly do have it. In certain areas of the site, they went on to make further recommendation where we have some overlapping systems, in this particular case, 2D and 2E. 2D, is based on one chamber elevation, and 2E is based on a different one. And where we have the overlap in terms of the groundwater contours, they're noting that 2D might not comply, but 2E would comply. Those are conditions that we can certainly address by simply changing the elevation of this segment of 2D to match 2E and get us back into compliance with that 2 feet of separation that GZA has pointed out to us. So we can certainly do that.
Phil, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but what do you mean you can do what? You're going to change the elevation?
We can accommodate the elevation, Mr. Chairman. So what's happening here, just to get into the numbers, system 2D, the bottom of everything that's identified here, system 2D, is set at a bottom elevation of 123.0 per the record plans. The bottom elevation of system 2E can be modified and addressed to make sure that we maintain that same separation of 2 feet on the 2E elevation, which I believe is slightly higher, I think, and that's what I want to look at. But we can take a look at it. What I'm suggesting though is, we're sort of on our heels in terms of reacting to the comments today. But by individual design, we know that we have the elevation of 2.0 of separation. We just need to further prove that, obviously, to satisfy this GZA comment. Okay. Jumping back to the letter, I apologize. I'm just trying to get through it quickly, and then we can open it up to questions. So that was C, which is what I was referring to. Comment D was a comment regarding how we contoured out the estimated seasonal high water table in our AutoCAD modeling environment. We could take a closer look at it, but we know that our data points were derived from the test pits that we have on site. It's just a matter of taking a follow-up review of it to see if there's anything amiss in the surface that was created there. And then the last comment under this section, GZA recommends that the applicant obtain additional test pit information, specifically test pits excavated within the footprint of the proposed subsurface infiltration systems to better define the estimated seasonal high groundwater table. So we understand the suggestion and we can acknowledge that. Certain areas of the site weren't accessible to us because there are existing houses there that we obviously can't test that will ultimately become drainage. So we would offer up for the commission, we'd be happy to conduct some confirmatory test pits, and we'd suggest to do that as a condition if the commission is willing to support that as part of any order of conditions that they're willing to issue on the project. And what we can do with that is, when the demo is complete, when the site is prepared, we can review the water table that's there and just really reconfirm what we've interpolated out here on the site. Two more, and I'm almost done. Comment 9 was a Scrivener error, a labeling error on our plan. We've corrected that. GZA has noted that we've corrected that. Comment 13, which is sort of a lengthy comment. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I will just get right down to the bottom line on it. GZA was making the continued recommendation about conducting additional on-site soil testing as part of the groundwater mounding analyses and methodology. We reported back to them that we remain of the opinion that the additional testing is not required. It's not prescribed by the stormwater management standards, and GZA rightfully so continued in terms of their opinion that they put out that, quote, "It is GZA's opinion that the methodologies used cannot sufficiently predict the potential for excessive mounding, given the limited depth to groundwater information and the complexity and size of the proposed infiltration gallery system." So that, of course, will be a point of impasse between, the engineering calculations that we've provided and obviously the peer review consultant's opinion regarding that data. So I guess to sum it up and put a bow tie on it, most of the comments have been addressed by GZA's words. Where one comment remains outstanding in terms of compliance with groundwater elevations, I think some additional clarification can accomplish that. Where we have this separation of fundamental ideals on the groundwater mounding analyses, I just think we'll have to agree to disagree on it as we talked about at the last meeting. So that's where we're at. Again, I see Steve on the call. I don't want to steal his thunder or certainly speak on his behalf, but I know he is here tonight as well.
Sure, Phil. Thank you very much. I mean, from the perspective of the commission, we retained, at your cost, I acknowledge, but we retained the consultant for GZA for purposes of hydrology consultation. And we looked to them for guidance. And starting in looking at the February 7th, 2023 GZA report. And again, I'm on 13, the same one that you just concluded with. And it says, GZA strongly recommends the evaluation of the potential for SMS failure due to groundwater mounding using three-dimensional numerical modeling methods, site-specific subsurface data, and the maximum probable storm and snowmelt events. So, we did have a discussion over that. And I think in your response to that, you declined to give us that information. And now we've got their report that you just went over. And I mean, it says here that our above comments are focused on higher level concerns regarding technical appropriateness of the overall methodology presented in the information and reviews by GZA. It is GZA's opinion that because the assumptions required to use the analytical, that is the hand-touch method, are not supported by the available site data and design of the proposed stormwater management system, use of the method is not appropriate and therefore does not meet the regulatory requirements. Now, all along, we've had similar discussions on another project that we are looking for mounding analysis. And I think your position is it's not required by the regulations. Our consultant is now saying to us that it does not, your method does not meet the regulatory requirements. And in fact, we need additional site-specific data, and we need a three-dimensional modeling analysis to be done. And this is a little bit like deja vu, I think, but are you declining to give us the site-specific data and utilizing the three-dimensional model. And let me back up. When I say site specific, I go back to comment E in comment 9 E. I think here it is. GZA recommends that the applicant obtain additional test pit information, specifically test pits excavated within the footprint of the proposed subsurface infiltration systems to better define the estimated seasonal high groundwater table. I mean, that's very specific, site-specific data, not post-permit and, during the construction process. But now, to see if the system works. And so the commission is asking and has asked specifically for that site-specific data and to use the three-dimensional modeling, not the hand touche method. I think putting us in a box if you're declining to give us that site-specific data and utilizing the three-dimensional modeling system.
Yeah.
Are you declining to provide that data and utilize that analysis?
Yes, we would continue that position. That's what we talked about at the last meeting. We have a difference of opinion in terms of what is required in regulatory standards and adherence, and it's our opinion we meet those standards. It's understandable. GZA put their comment forth on behalf of the commission. The commission supported that. We understand that, but we're maintaining our same position. Yes. With regard to the test pits, the suggestion about doing those as a condition of a permit is because it allows us during the construction, when we remove the houses and the other obstructions that are in the way, we can conduct test pits in more specific areas underneath some of the areas that were identified in today's GZA letter, just to confirm those elevations. And the reason we, not suggesting we want to take any adverse risk in doing that or deferring any part of that, is we obviously have confidence in the data that we're putting forth, confidence in the test pits that were done, and how we've applied the data. The additional test pits is really just to double and triple check those numbers in areas where we couldn't dig or didn't dig because the house was there, or the driveway, et cetera.
All right, so I guess, as I understand it, part of the issue is that you want to use your interpolation approach, and we're asking for site-specific data to essentially confirm that the design will work before we say yes. Is that, I think that's where we are, correct?
It could be. I mean, so my reading of the GZA, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, in terms of functionality, as you guys will have to make a decision on. What I read in this comment is we just need some additional confirmation that the numbers are there. The numbers that you say are there are in fact there. I don't read in there that the system is not going to work. It's an inappropriate system. It's poorly designed. It's just make sure the numbers are there that we say they are, and additional clarity on the design can do that.
Well, but basically, I'm going back to 9 here, but basically they're saying that they don't think your data does support the model that you used. And then in 13, they're saying, A, we need site-specific data, and B, we need a different modeling approach. And part of it is clearly because of the complexity of the site.
So, Mr. Chairman, you and I, as we're talking, we're the only voices talking right now. We might be conflating two of the topics that are in the latest letter. So just for clarity, the latest letter today, if we were to boil it down, we have 2 open issues. One, our confirmation of the elevations of the estimated seasonal high groundwater below the subsurface infiltration systems. That's the point at which I'm suggesting confirmatory test pits can check those boxes to make sure the numbers are there. We base it off of interpolation using the data that we have. The other, the methodology, the additional on-site testing, those matters were related to the groundwater mounding analyses, which is the separate comment. I just want to be clear that we're talking about two separate issues and
Correct.
not a consolidation of them.
I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree.
And Mr. Chairman, I jump in. Steve D'Ambrosio with GZA. I agree. Phil's description is correct.
I just said that. I agree with him.
Yes.
I agree with what he said. We all agree.
We're good.
Okay.
I gotcha. All right. Questions from commissioners? Comments? I mean, my position is we need the data. That recommendation is our consultant's recommendation that we need the data and we need the analysis done on a three-dimensional modeling basis. This is a very complex site. I certainly have never seen one with 52,000 cubic yards of fill. That's a first for me. So it does require a close look, and I know you've said in the past, Phil, that you're in compliance with the regulations, but our advice is that, well, no, not under these circumstances, that the lack of supportive data does not make you in compliance with the regulations. So I think that the commission is reasonable in asking for more site-specific data and the different and the analytical approach to the mounding analysis. But I will open it up to questions, and I will give it over to Jim or to Steve as well. But I'd like to hear any comments from commissioners first, or questions. I can't see everybody, so I don't know if anybody's got their hand raised. Arthur or Tom or Wendy or Hans. I'm looking around. I don't see any questions there. I do see hands here from Scott Horsley, so I'll go to Scott.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just not to reiterate too much because we've been over this many times, but just to be very clear, we've done a very close look at this. We've spent a lot of time on it. I think GZA is in concert with our strong recommendation that the model that's been done so far is inadequate. And even the applicant at the beginning said this is a complex site, a challenging site. That's on the record, and it sure is. And I think it's pretty clear that this model is required. It's the only way you're going to get the answers. As you've been asking, where does the water go? Great question. We don't know yet. Hasn't been shown. And then the second point is this comment that we need to wait to do the test pits until we remove the buildings so we can get access to the site. I don't think that's accurate. I think they can get test pits without removing the buildings. So I think that's an inaccurate statement that would be the reason why you can't do the test pits now. If we need to, we can pull out a site plan and go over where test pits can go with the existing buildings there. So I don't think that's a fair reason why you can't do the test pits now. And I'll leave it there. I know Mike Mobile would like to comment too, so I turn it to him if I may, Mr. Chair.
Certainly. Mike, are you there?
I am. Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. Mike Mobile, McDonald Morrissey Associates, appearing on behalf of, or at the request of abutters, the proposed project. I just want two quick things to say. One is on the matter of data collection at this site. I certainly don't want to put words in Phil's mouth here, but it is important to understand the data collection is not limited to test pits based on GZA's recommendations. If you refer back to their first letter that was dated December 16th of 2022, on page 4 of that letter, there's a pretty extensive list of information that they would recommend being collected, site-specific data that they would recommend being collected to support the modeling effort. I understand there are two distinct items here, but on that modeling and mounding assessment item, those things include site-specific estimates of hydraulic conductivity made using water level response data from slug test indoor pumping test data. That's just one example. There are several other items. So it's not just a matter of digging some test pits. It's a lot more than that, and rightfully so. The modeling that's been done to date did not use, in the majority of cases, measurements that reflect actual site-specific conditions. And in a situation like this, where groundwater mounding is a very important issue, not using site-specific information is a big mistake. The other matter that I just want to bring up and have on the record, I think tonight, potentially the last opportunity, would be the fact that I've issued a number of letters on this project to date. I've lost count, quite frankly, of how many I've issued, and I've pointed out a variety of issues. I've asked a variety of questions, just in attempts to better understand the analyses that have been done by the applicant's consultants. And to date, I can only think of one instance where any of my questions or points have been responded to here. And again, I'm working on behalf of neighbors to this potential project. So, they're interested in these matters. They've hired me to look at these matters. So I think it's somewhat important that we get answers to these things. And the one response I've gotten to date is, no, you cannot have our model. You cannot have our model files to better understand what's been done. So I don't know how that's acceptable. I'm certainly frustrated by it, and I just wanted to point it out again and have it on the record. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
All right, yeah, thank you very much. I see Kathleen Patton with a hand raised. Kathleen, if you're there, you're on mute.
Hello, sorry, I was on mute. Forgive me for that. I've been following this and I appreciate the information that was contributed by Mr. Cordero. I'm offering some data that I've collected as of today, and I have films of the Wendell Park stream. We are the...
Could I interrupt you, Ms. Patton? Are you
I'm sorry.
a resident, or do you live in the neighborhood, or what?
Yes, forgive me. Protocol. 93 Wendell Park. We are on the other side of Canton Avenue from this project. As it stands, a Wendell Park stream is the repository of the water that runs downhill from that area. That area is, as you know, part of the Neponset River watershed and comprises rivulets and streams. All of that flows into Wendell Park stream that flows into Pine Tree Brook, that flows into the Neponset River. And periodically, Wendell Park stream overflows, as it happens today. It was in the brief time that we had the rain that we had today. I have photos of the stream going over its bank. It happens. The stream can only take so much, and the water table is not overloaded at this time. If we exceed its current ability to absorb water running downhill, as it always does, this area will not be able to withstand that additional water. I am concerned that the water mounding analyses do not reflect what is in actual going to happen downhill. The data does not seem to reflect what is happening at present. And I have photo evidence of that as of today.
Right, thank you very much, ma'am. And I appreciate your comments and your direct, as a recipient witness, I think it's important that we hear from you. Are there other questions, commissioners, abutters, members of the public, anyone? I think we're at kind of an impasse here. I'm speaking for myself, but I am requesting, and then I'll put it out to all the commissioners, but I'm requesting the site-specific data that has been requested, and just so the record is clear, and I am referencing all the letters from GCA, including the December 16th letter, because I know that I didn't mention, soil compaction studies, conductivity, all of those, that site-specific data. But I'm very focused in on, the test bits. And I have no idea, and Phil, you might be able to help me out here, as to whether or not the house is actually sitting on the area where those I guess they're under the building. Yeah, but I think what you had before, all the bays where the water will go to be stored, I think that's the area where the test pits would have to be done. And I have no idea whether or not the house is sitting there now. You'd have to demolish the house and take the test pit, or you could put the test pit beside the house. Do you know that? I mean, that was a point brought up by Scott Horsley, that you could do the test pits. Is that true?
So there's a lot to unpack there. Let me see if I can sort of clarify it out a little bit. Bear with me for just a moment. Roughly, so one of the areas that I was referring to relative to the GZA letter, and I'm on the site plan now, is they had highlighted some clarity was needed in this area, you know, on the edge of that system, and really that 2E system. The building, the existing building and driveway and backyard is roughly here. And I'm just drawing that sort of freehand. It's generally in this area, you know, the back deck, the existing house. So could we inch close to that? Sure, of course. You know, I'm not here to split hairs with you or necessarily split hairs with Dr. Horsley, whether the test pit is here or the test pit is here. I'm merely suggesting that there is a good opportunity for us to do it when the obstructions are out of the way. We do not appear to be on the precipice of a sky is falling situation. It is a clarifying situation. If this were jeopardous and we said, oh my goodness, none of these systems work in terms of separation of the water table, you know, we might be in a more amenable position to do it now. But the reality is, again, as I read this letter, they want confirmation from us where that water table is, and no better time to do that when we can open up the excavation and just reconfirm all of that. That's what I was suggesting. And again, I'll take the opportunity to reiterate, we are of course aware of the multiple GZA letters and the suggestion in their conditions for hydraulic conductivity, slug testing, borings, things that are outside of test pits. That's all, again, related to the groundwater mounding situation, which, you know, our stance is that we don't need to do that to support the design that's in place. The test pits that we're referring to through tonight's letter is a confirmation of the water table just for the purpose of confirming the separation from the bottom of the system to the estimated seasonal high water table. I just want to make sure that those two issues are stressed and clear. So again, we're not overlapping what GZA's comments were. Again, Stephen, I don't mean to step on you. I know you're here. I'm not speaking on your behalf, of course, but those are the comments as we're looking at them. So there you go.
All right, thanks. And so I can inquire of Steve or Jim. I mean, I read your letter. You guys authored it, but do you want to, from a hydrology perspective, is it, and I don't know who actually authored the letter, whether it was Jim or Steve, but could you comment on whether or not it would be appropriate for the commission to receive this site-specific data that you have recommended that we receive in a review, number one, and number two, whether or not the three-dimensional modeling is the more appropriate mechanism for conducting a mounding analysis?
Yeah, this is Jim Week. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay. And sorry for the lack of video. I'm calling in it's a power failure where I'm located, so it's just on the cell phone. But I think importantly, the clarification of the seasonal high water table on its own really wouldn't change our overall recommendation. That is to say, and I think others have said this, that we're dealing with two separate things here. The comment about additional test pits and clarification of seasonal high water table is a separate issue, which does affect the overall calculation, or would affect the overall calculation. But ultimately, the methodology that's being used, as we've said, and I think you've stated correctly, is not correct given the site conditions. So it really is a separate item, and addressing that by itself would not really improve our ability to evaluate or give the commission any recommendations relative to the potential for additional or decreasing of the potential for failure. We really would need to have the other information, which I think Mike Mobile had referenced from our previous letters too, that it would be more than just that. So where I'm going with this is that addressing that one item by itself really wouldn't change our opinion.
Understood. So it is your recommendation that we get that site-specific data. And I'm now focused not in comment 9, but I'm focused on comment 13, that we need site-specific data and a three-dimensional modeling for mounting analysis. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right.
And there are many facets to this, but I think the most important one relative to the methodology is that the Hantush method is a two-dimensional method of analysis, which does not account for the effects of adjacent infiltration galleries. And in order to do that, you need to model it in 3 dimensions, which would require the numerical modeling approach that we've recommended.
Thank you, Jim, very much.
You're welcome.
I think I know where this is headed, but I have made this request in the past to get this data and to have that analysis done. Phil has very politely declined to do so. I think we're in the same posture, but it's my view that we need this information to make a rational determination on the viability of the project. But I want to make sure that that I'm not just looking for myself. So I'm going to go around and say, maybe it's a straw poll here. I'm not sure what it is. I'm looking for a consensus. But Tom, do you agree that we need the data that's been requested?
Yeah, I do, because of the extremity of the site, so to speak, the degree of development and the amount of fill.
Right. Wendy, do you have a view on this?
I agree as well with both of you.
Hans?
I agree.
Arthur? I've lost you. Where are you? Arthur, are you there? If you are, and I can't see you, but you're on mute. All right. Well, we still have our quorum. So where are we, Phil? Are you going to agree to a continuance? Because we do need the data. You've heard the consensus. If you're not going to get it, then there's really no point to continuing the hearing.
Yeah, we would echo that, Mr. Chairman. So our stance remains the same in terms of providing the additional modeling and the 3-dimensional modeling. So that unfortunately is not going to change. So I would agree with you that continuing the hearing likely wouldn't make sense, since it sounds like we're down to that as the last issue that we will continue to disagree on. So it likely does not seem worth continuing the hearing further.
All right. To some extent, though, you're forcing a vote, and the rationale for a negative vote would be, as DEP has acknowledged in the regulations, that insufficient data or a declination to provide the data is grounds for a denial of the permit. And you're kind of pushing us in that direction. And I want to make sure all the cards are on the table. And I Jesse, you can weigh in and tell me if I'm wrong on that, or Ned, you can weigh in on it as well. But I think the commission is getting pushed into a position where if we don't get the data, then we're going to have to deny the permit on that basis.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I guess I'd like to highlight just one brief point, because I think what's happening here, unfortunately, is we're to some extent talking past each other in the same fashion and not to make reference to previous projects that aren't at issue here, but similar to what happened on the 582 Blue Hill Avenue project. And if it would be helpful, I could put up my share screen and just really highlight, the point of disagreement that we have here, which really it all comes down to the portion of the site and the portion of the project activities that are within this commission's jurisdiction and that we're here to talk about tonight, which is very, very limited. And it's, I'm happy to put up the share screen. It's a small portion of a buffer zone at the rear of the site, and it's a small portion of the buffer zone at the bottom of the site. The issues that we're talking about tonight and the issues relating to the groundwater mounding and the issues relating to the test pit data, relating to a lot of these stormwater management infiltration systems, these are outside of the commission's jurisdiction. So I think from our perspective, DEP has been very clear in dealings with the commission in prior instances and in other towns and cities that the commission's jurisdiction and what DEP is going to be looking at if they are called upon to review this project is limited to those areas. And that those areas are the areas of concern for the commission and the areas where it's appropriate to issue conditions. What we have tried to do in this process, as we talked about last month, is we've really endeavored to try to work with the commission and provide data and analysis and response to requests for information that frankly go beyond the commission's jurisdiction, because we want you to get to a comfort level with this project. Recognizing that it's a larger project than typically is seen in this area, and recognizing that there are unique circumstances dealing with this site. Where we come down and where we disagree, I think, is where this kind of analysis is supposed to take place, and that would lead me to a follow-up point that I want to just reiterate and bring to the commission's attention and bring to GZA's attention in case anyone is not aware of this or maybe lost sight of it, which is that the Zoning Board of Appeals during its review, as we've talked about a number of times, it was subject to a full peer review by Tetra Tech, which was reviewing the project under the town's local wetlands protection bylaw. What came out of that peer review process was a robust series of conditions which require an oversight and analysis by a hydrogeologist. That could be GZA at the appropriate time. It could be Tetra Tech at the appropriate time. That's really up to the town of Milton. But what the program calls for is, one, the retention at our expense of a hydrogeologist to advise the town, to advise DPW in the oversight of the construction of the stormwater management structures that we all have spent so much time talking about. What that requires of the applicant in this case, and this is not a state requirement, it's never been done in any project that I'm aware of, it requires a 6-month program of monitoring wells to be installed on the project site with data collection, I believe on a monthly basis, provided to the town's hydrogeologist before shovels go in the ground. All that data collection is done before the project even starts construction. The installation and the inspection of those stormwater management structures is subject to DPW oversight. It's subject to NIPD's permitting. It's subject to a stormwater management permit by the town of Milton Department of Public Works. All overseen by the town's hydrogeologist during this course of extensive oversight, which again, it's not something that's typically done. It's not something that's required under any law of state or federal law that I'm aware of. In addition to all that monitoring prior to and during installation, the conditions of the comp permit also call for a year post-construction of monitoring of the stormwater management systems to confirm that these sky is falling scenarios that we've been hearing so much about during this process don't in fact occur. And if there is some kind of effect that is measured after that year, the town has the option to, 1, require mitigation, 2, require additional testing, and 3, they can only allow the removal of these monitoring wells after there's confirmation of no effect. So this could be potentially a long-standing program of monitoring and potential mitigation to be applied if there is in fact an effect. So there's a lot of protections that are in place, and I want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. This isn't a case that if the commission votes to approve and votes to issue conditions with respect to the portion of the site that's under your jurisdiction, we're not just off to the races and we can do whatever we want. There's an extensive program of monitoring and permitting that still is yet to take place. So with those comments, I defer to everything Phil has said tonight. We respect everyone's opinion here. We respect everyone's position here, but I think we're just at a point of disagreement fundamentally on what we're here talking about and what's required.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just briefly, Ned Corcoran on behalf of neighbors. I don't know how you ignore the specific recommendation that GZA made that this type of mounting is required regulatorily as part of this process. That's their recommendation. I don't know how you ignore it. I don't know how you issue a permit that's conditioned. I think what they're requesting is appropriate. What they provided is limited and substantially useless. And I think the commission has a right to be assured that any order of conditions that it would grant would be protective of the environmental conditions here. And I don't know how you do that without requesting the type of testing and data that GZA is recommending. They're your consultant. They've determined that it's required from a regulatory perspective, and I don't know how you ignore that.
Thank you. Any other abutters, members of the public wish to be heard? I don't know if that hand was just raised again, Kathleen, or if that's your old hand.
No, forgive me. I did not take my hand down. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Well, unless there are questions or comments by commissioners, I think we can move to a vote. I think we've arrived at the situation where the applicant has officially declined the request of the Conservation Commission to provide the data that has been requested. I don't have to go over it again. And on the basis of insufficient information, I would make a motion to deny the permit for failure to provide requisite information. Is there a second to that motion?
John, I'll second that.
Thank you, Hans. Is there any discussion among commission members? Hearing none.
I just need to say, John, that I'm going to recuse myself on this vote because I worked for the abutters earlier.
All right. So we'll do a roll call vote.
John, we don't have a quorum then.
No, we still have a quorum because you can recuse yourself. It doesn't break the quorum if you don't vote, as long as the quorum is, we're in session. He's simply abstaining from the vote.
Okay.
Doesn't break the quorum. Wendy, how do you vote?
I vote no.
No, what? No to you want to yes to deny the permit, or no, not to deny the permit?
I'm confused now. I'm voting yes now. Yeah, I'm voting.
The motion is to deny
Sorry,
the permit
so late.
on the basis of the refusal to provide the information requested.
Correct. Yes.
So it's a yes. All right, Hans, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
All right. And I vote yes, John Kiernan. And I still don't see Arthur. I thought he was here, but he's gone, but we still have the quorum in place. And Tom, you are abstention.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Well, folks, everybody has been civil and professional, and I thank you very much for presentations from everybody. Thanks all.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
All right. Next on the agenda is, where is my agenda? I've got too many papers here. We are now at 12, informational. This is gas main replacement project, Blue Hill Avenue, Armour Road, Cheever Street, Blue Hill Terrace, and Brush Hill Road. Presenter. It is late, but I don't know if anybody stayed with us for this length of time. Steve, do you know who the presenter was going to be for the informational only? Steve, you're on mute.
Yes, this was Boston Gas / National Grid. And Tracy was supposed to stop back in with us. Let's see. I'd like to get to a particular screen if I can find the damn thing. Sorry. Forgive my language. It's late. Here we go. There we go. Okay. As I remember, this is a replacement gas main being constructed in Blue Hills Ave, the straight line here on this. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Steve.
Okay. Blue Hill Ave, and I believe this is Armour Road, right up in here.
That's
Comes
right.
off at a left angle. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So this is some work that they are doing under the ability in the regs to do this without having to go through heavy permitting.
You know, Steve, not to interrupt, but I don't really get why they had a notice of intent for the other project, but not this project. Is it that the other crossing was actually in the resource area and this is not? Is that why?
Well, yes, it was above the resource area. That's correct.
Oh,
If you
okay.
look down on a plan view, it's actually in the resource area. That's correct.
This project is only a buffer zone project, huh?
That's correct, as far as I understand. Yep. So that's
I think we
informational.
probably
only.
lost Phil already, and he may be able to answer this, but I would hope that they're coordinating this because 16 Armour Road is right where it takes a 90-degree angle. It's right at the corner where 16 Armour is.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
It's true.
I'll tell you what, let me, when I will contact Tracy and make sure that they're coordinating. How's that?
Good. All right. Because that just makes common sense that it be done.
Of course. Yep. I'll put that on my homework list. And I do not have any additional business this evening.
All right. So just so that everybody's clear on this site, there is no RDA, and they cite to the regs that give them an exemption.
Right.
And I'm quoting here for the public's benefit: the project is exempt from a filing under the WPA, the Wetlands Protection Act, as it is being conducted to maintain, repair, or replace, but not substantially change or enlarge an existing and lawfully located structure or facility used in the service of the public and used to provide electric or gas services, which the town of Milton recognizes. So it's informational only. It does not require a vote on our part. But I think Steve would be very helpful, and you might want to put a call into Phil as well, and make sure that they're coordinated, because it wouldn't make any sense if they're at odds and opening a street and then closing it and then opening it and closing it again.
Makes very good sense, John. I'd be happy to do that.
All right, thank you. All right, so I think I don't have any other additional business. Other than just for the public's benefit, there was a site walk at Kyle Road, Herrick Drive and School Street, Canton Avenue, Pope's Pond, and Randolph Avenue this past Saturday to look at different parcels of land that are being proposed by the school building committee for A, a swap of land, or B, an eminent domain. From an informational perspective, they will go eventually to the May town meeting. But this is just informational. The site walk took place on Saturday. There was a conference at the town hall after that, and we shall see what comes of that. Right now, there's nothing before the Conservation Commission, but it's certainly an issue that will be presented to town meeting in May. Information only. Anything else by way of additional business?
John, there's one thing I wanted to bring up. Given that we are seeing more projects that have complexities to them, including what we're seeing in the school building with these housing projects. And I'm just wondering if it's worth pursuing the ability to retain a third-party review on a quicker basis to potentially have the ability for some sort of on-call services for maybe a couple different consultants, maybe 2 or 3, to sort of help us in facilitating the ability to pull in a third-party engineering consultant, on a quicker turnaround time than we've seen.
I think the answer is yes. The more difficult proposition is the statutory authority is there to allow us to do it. The problem that we'd have with having somebody on call is that we don't know who the right expert is. And we've got some contracting issues that we have to put it out. It's not to a bid necessarily, but we have to put it out to more than one potential consultant in order to comply with the bidding laws. That's what slows us down, is that we get town council involved. He's got to look at the contracts. It goes to our, whatever the town contracting division is, for approval. And then it has to go to the select board. That's what slows us down. If we had somebody kind of on call, as you suggested, we wouldn't know whether or not it was a hydrologist, a mechanical engineer, a civil engineer. It would change.
We could define those capabilities as part of a bid request. So to find, invite firms that have
all of those services. Yeah, that's probably correct. That's probably correct. I wish Arthur were here, because that's something I think we'd have to have the select board support for. I'm sure it could be done from the legal counsel, town council's perspective, but we'd need, because it's a contracting provision, it would require the select board support. Yeah. So I think it's a good point. And you can talk to, I will certainly call Arthur. I've got a call with him tomorrow morning anyway. I will follow up on that, and I invite you to do that as well. But I think the idea is to garner some support from the select board to do exactly what you said. And I don't know, do you know whether the ZBA has somebody on call like that?
I don't know if the ZBA does, but I mean, obviously the planning board does. I mean, they've mentioned Tetra Tech, niche, and those are.
Yeah, those are ZBA. Those are all 40B projects, and that's them. Yeah. That's the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Yeah. But I do.
And I can call John Leonard and see whether or not he's got a program for that. But you're right, it is slow. This one was faster than the first one, but the first one was interminably long. So it's a good point, Hans, and I'll follow up with Arthur and see if we can get some select board support for that. And I'll check to see how the other boards do it.
Okay.
All right. Nothing further?
One comment regarding an earlier session. I did the math. 500 times 600 is 300,000.
Oh, I know. I had that on. I had it written on when I went through it. That I didn't put the number on it, but Ned said, "I know it's a large number." Yeah, 600 trees at $500 a piece. That's $300,000.
That's more money than we've had to play with.
I know.
Yeah.
I got it.
Can we make another forest with that money?
I've had to plant that much around a substation. So
that's a lot of trees.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't miss that. In fact, I did it in my head, and then I said, I better use a calculator. That can't be correct, and it is. It's a lot of money. All right, they didn't seem to bat an eye.
Well, it's true they are cutting a lot of trees, and we need to think about how we can mitigate.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, and that's also familiar with the standard. So
true enough. All right, we ready for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're done. God bless all. Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
Good night.
Good
Good night, everybody.
Night all.
Thank you, John.